I worked for a funeral home about 25 years ago or so. The mortician was a good friend of mine, and he offered me a job. This is a true story, by the way, even though some of the names have been changed. One day, I wasn't feeling very well, so I told my wife I was going to go to the clinic to get checked out. As I was on my way, the police, ambulance, and fire trucks were heading out of town, lights on and all the sirens blasting. I didn't really pay that much attention. As I pulled into the parking lot, my cell phone rang. It was the big one, the kind that looked like a house phone but was plugged into a cigarette lighter. I answered the call. It was my mom. "Mom, I just got to the clinic and I'm not feeling too well. Can I just call you later?" I said. She then replied, "As soon as you're done, come to the house." Then she hung up. So I checked in and began to wait in the dreaded waiting room. As I was waiting for my name to be called, I was thinking about the 60-mile round trip to my mom's house. I really didn't want to go because of how I felt. But finally, I heard my name called after what seemed like forever. The doctor gave me some meds and sent me on my way. I then gave my mom a call. "Hey Mom, can I come out tomorrow? I'm just feeling really sick." She then said, "Have your brother drive you out. It's important." Then she hung up again. Well, I couldn't find my brother, so I had to drive myself. My wife was busy. We homeschooled our children back then. When I finally got to my mom's house, it was around 4 or 5 p.m. When I got there, I asked her what was going on. She then asked, "Where's your brother at?" I couldn't find him. "I think he's with his new girlfriend, Wilma," I said. "Take a seat. I saw you in a dream." She began to speak. "You were helping a man and he was going somewhere. I'm not sure where he was going, but you were helping him," she said. "Who was or is he? Did you recognize him?" I asked. "I'm not sure who it was, but he knew you, and he also knew Leanne. In my dream, he stayed with you for 3 days, and during that time, things were not going right at your house. Be safe these next few days. The Lord shows me these things for a reason. You know that." "I know, Mom. I'll be careful," I said. She expected me to stay for dinner, so I stayed. After we ate, family members came and went. My brother David came about 8 p.m., just as I was leaving back home. "Hey, did you hear about that wreck between here and town?" David said. "I've been here since about 4. What happened?" I asked. "Some guy totaled his truck down by old agency on 89. It happened around 11 this morning," he said. "The only thing I saw was the police and ambulance. Even the fire trucks were heading out of town when I was going to the hospital," I told him. After some more small talk, I told Mom that I was going home again. "Drive carefully now. Kiss the babies for me as well," she said as I was leaving. I took the long way back home just to be nosy. I thought I would come across the place where the wreck happened. A couple of police cars, a highway patrol, and a tow truck were all that was left at the site of the crash. I continued on driving, and after a few miles, I saw an old friend of mine walking down the side of the road. I stopped and offered him a ride. He put his duffel bag in and jumped in the front seat. After greeting him, I asked him where he was going. He didn't say anything. He just pointed towards the front of my car. The ride back home was rather quiet. When we got back home, well, to our town, I asked him if he wanted me to take him home, and he said, "Can't go home right now. Do you mind if I just camp at your place for a couple of days? I just need to get my head straight. I gotta check with Leanne first, but it'll be fine." I ran it past her. She did say it would be fine since we'd known him for a long time. We had a few trailer homes on our property, all of which were livable. After showing him one with running water, we settled in for the night. "Hey man, it's Mike. Sorry to wake you up." "What's the matter? It's 4 in the morning," I said. Mike was the mortician. "I need you to do a pickup in Great Falls ASAP. Can you go right now?" It was money that I needed, so I got ready. I went to the funeral home to get the hearse. At the funeral home, the lights turned on when I pulled up. I pulled up to Town Pump to fill up the hearse when I realized just the day before that Mike had talked about the lights. The trip was not what I expected to Great Falls. The hearse broke down. I called Mike, and he took care of everything from his end. I did get it fixed, but I didn't pick up the body until after 9 p.m. I never knew who passed. I just signed papers, loaded up the passenger. They are in a body bag or cardboard box. I could never disrespect the ones who passed on. I'm just there to make the last days on Earth as pleasant and comfortable as possible. As I left Great Falls, the sky was already dark purple. Halfway home, the gurney came loose and rolled up and hit the back of my seat. I stopped and fastened the gurney back in place. This actually happened all the way home. I think my passenger was having fun with me, but I was nervous. Mike said that he was going to meet with me, but that never happened. As I pulled around back, I opened the doors, backed in and began to unload my buddy. After I placed him in the cooler, the phone rang. So-and-so funeral home, Angelo speaking. Yeah, that's fine. I just need to let Leanne know. I haven't been home since 4 this morning. Do you need to go home and eat, or anything? Mike was asking. Nah, I fixed myself up in Great Falls, I said. Alright, see you in a bit then. The funeral home suddenly became cold and quiet. Even the sounds outside seemed to quiet down. Then the lights flickered. At the same time, I could hear doors slamming, some doorknobs turning. I don't know how long this went on, but I ran to the front door. I was out of there. I opened the door and ran smack into Mike. What the hell, Angelo? Are you okay? He said. I was shaking and trying to talk, but nothing came out. I finally calmed down enough to explain what had taken place. We chalked it up to not enough rest and being sick, so he told me to go home. On the way, I couldn't get the day's events out of my mind. I told Leanne everything. We spent about an hour praying, and I was still scared and shaken up. I couldn't sleep all that night. Every little noise would spook the hell out of me. I was really scared. The morning light was a great and welcome sight for me. I tried forgetting about it and went to go check on my old friend. I knocked on the door where we let him crash in. That's when he gave a weak reply. Come in. Leanne said, you haven't ate anything, I said. I'm just not hungry, he said. You need a ride to your house? I'm actually going back that way. Do you think you can just put me up for a couple of more days? He said. Well, we are kind of busy and things are hectic around here, I told him. I won't be any trouble, he said. Just a few more days. You have to go home and face the music, I said. I knew I had to be at the funeral home, so off I went. I arrived at work about 8:30 a.m. Mike was asleep on a couch that he had inside his office. How could he sleep in a place like this? I said to myself. He sat up as I walked in. Good morning, he said, still half asleep. Anything weird happen after I left? I asked him. Not a thing. I have a full day in Cut Bank today. And I was wondering if you can handle things around here. I should be back around 3 or 4 p.m. I have to meet with the family at 4:30. I agreed to hold down the fort, even though inside of me, I really didn't want to. Fear began to build up inside of me as I saw his car drive away. As I was locking the doors, I stayed at the front for a few minutes. Nobody to talk to, and who knows what time people will show up. And that's when I remembered that the funeral home had a kitchen on the southeast side of the building. So I went there to make a pot of coffee to pry my eyes open with. As I filled the pot with water and started prepping my cup, the events of the night before began to come back into my head. Something is definitely going on. I started to remember everything that my mom taught me growing up and what these things possibly meant. Or maybe it's simply because I haven't been getting some good sleep. That's when I heard someone call out, "Hey, is anybody here? Just a minute, I'll be right with you." I grabbed my coffee trying to make it to where this person was at. More than likely someone seeking information about someone who had just passed away. As I started walking back to where the front doors were, it occurred to me that I had locked the doors before I went to make coffee. I got to the front doors, and sure enough, they were locked. What the fuck? As soon as I reacted to that, I heard a high-pitched laugh behind me in the wake room. A big open room where the bodies were put for wakes and viewing. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I felt sick to my stomach. I even started feeling lightheaded and almost passed out. "Come on, Angelo, get a grip, man," I said to myself. Just then, I heard a bunch of tools in the back room crash to the floor. The room that we cleaned and dressed the bodies at. Man, screw that. I didn't go back to find out. I ran out to my car and called my brother on my phone. David, can you come over and keep me company for a while? Just until I get everything cleaned and ready for this guy's family. I would really appreciate it. I'll be there in a couple of minutes. What's the matter? You getting scared? I just need someone to watch the front while I clean up. I lied to him. When I tell you I was scared, I really was. I know what you're thinking. Then why are you working there? You see, it's a different kind of fear than the normal fear that one experiences. I don't know if that makes sense. I even waited outside until he arrived. And even when he got there, I still felt that same feeling. I cleaned up the best that I could. What I had to do next was dust and wipe down the caskets in the display room. I had to open each one and dust it off and wipe it down, so that the family could choose one. Well, I finished and left them all open as if they were already occupied. I turned the lights off and went to have a smoke break with my brother. Do you ever hear strange things around here? David asked me with a serious look. Not really. I just go about my business. Nothing really bothers me here. I lied to him again. Well, I better get moving. I got things to see and people to do, he said jokingly. Wait a minute, and I actually have to wait until Mike gets here, I said. Come on, $5 a game, I told him. Alright, best out of 3. That's $15 a piece. And if you don't mind, do you mind getting me a cup of coffee as well? He said. I'll be right back. As I walked to the kitchen to get the coffee, I started brewing and walked back and handed him his cup and took my seat. Is Mike here, by the way? I thought I heard someone in that back room, he asked me. No, just us and our guest. He won't be here long. His family's gonna have a home wait, I told him. Huh, I swear I heard someone call you and cough, he said with a serious look on his face. Maybe he came back already. I'll go check it out, I said. As I entered the back room, it was like walking into a freezer. I thought I saw the light in the display room turned on, so I went to go check. When I went into the room, you guessed it, all the caskets were closed. Hell, forget this. I went back to where David was at and I told him that there was nobody there and that he must be hearing things or something. I didn't want to tell David what was going on because he might leave me here alone, which actually didn't help because after we played a few games he said he had to get going, and begging him to stay this time didn't help. Not only that, but the way he left. It's like he was leaving really urgently. I know he must have heard or seen something, and he didn't want to tell me. So once again, I was alone, and the fear that I felt was overwhelming. After a bit and not hearing any more noises, I began to feel a little bit better. But to be on the safe side, I went to my car and called Leanne. Hey sweetie, can you bring me some sage and sweet grass? Also my shell to smudge, an eagle feather. Look in the closet, that upper shelf. My cedar should be there too. Why? What's wrong? Are you alright? And where's Mike? She asked all these questions at once. Can you just get them here as soon as you can, please? I said. She was there within a few. As I said, I didn't want to be in this place anymore. So I was just standing in the doorway as she pulled up in the van. When she got out with everything, she then said, Who else is here with you? Nobody. It's just me, I said. She then looked behind me. Who was that guy standing behind you? I guess at this point nothing really surprised me, because I didn't even react to what she said. I simply asked for my sage, and all the other items I told her to bring. Then she said, 10 minutes. I'll give you 10 minutes before I go in there. I started feeling better now that I had this with me. I started praying and smudging the building. She then came in and sat down. That's when I told her everything that happened the day before, and the night before when I brought the body. After I smudged, things did quiet down a lot, but I insisted Leanne stay with me until Mike came back. I began to think maybe I was losing my mind. I had never experienced anything like this before. As we waited, she asked me what happened with David. I thought you said he was going to be here with you. Yeah, I don't know. He said he had stuff to see and people to do, and even to this day, he won't speak of what happened here. Anyways, nothing else happened for the next few hours. Mike came back a bit after 4 p.m. The family was there, so I made them comfortable and served them coffee while we waited for Mike. Damn, Angelo, you still feeling sick? Mike was asking. Yeah, not feeling too well. I took my meds. It should have passed in a few days. I told Mike. Have they been here long? He asked. That's their first cup of coffee, I said jokingly. A way to keep track of how long someone's been waiting. Alright, thanks for sticking around, man. I definitely owe you. You should go home and have Leanne take care of you, he said. I shook the hands of the family, offered my condolences, and left. As I was pulling out of the driveway, Mike came out and stopped me. You know what? Just go ahead and take off tomorrow. I need you at 100 for the funeral. I took him up on the offer and went home. The ride home took forever. Even though Leanne left the funeral home before me, I somehow made it home before her. As I pulled into our little trailer park, it used to be on the boarding school road. I could see our oldest daughter, Olivia, outside watching over our younger children, my son Ruben, and our baby Angela. Hey Dad, did you have a good day? She said. The other two were busy playing that they didn't care that I came home. You know how kids are. Spend as much time as you can with your kids because in some time, you'll be begging for their attention. Just a normal day. Where's Mom? I thought she was with you, Olivia said. She was right behind me. The van was running low on gas, so she must have stopped at the C-store, I said to her. I think someone's in the 6th store. The dogs were all going crazy over there. The 6th store was a trailer that we stripped down to just a shell, and we built 5 rooms with 1 bathroom. I told my daughter I had a friend camping out there for a couple of days. I forgot about him, and I decided to check up on him. I knocked on the door. No answer. I called his name while knocking on his door a little bit louder. Still no answer. Maybe he left while we were gone. Just when I was about to open the door, he cracked it open, his eyes half closed from the glare of the sun. Angelo, what's up? He said in a quiet voice. Just thought I would see how you're doing, man. Been kind of worried about you, I said to him. I just gotta get my head straight before I head back home. Do you think that I can stay one more night? I'll be out of here in the morning. Sure. I don't see why not. But hey, Jason, we've known each other for so long, I said to him. Why don't you come over to the big trailer? Leanne's gonna make some soup and fry bread, I told him. As I was going back to my trailer, Leanne pulled up in the van with some groceries. I helped her with the food and went back in for a quick shower. I then went to my room to change. As I moved about my room, I couldn't help but think about everything that's happened at the funeral home. I wonder if it was the meds I was taking. Maybe because I wasn't sleeping too much, and my imagination running away with me. Anyways, I felt like I was maybe losing my mind. I then went to the bathroom, turned the shower on, and let the hot water relax my muscles. Suddenly, the air became cold. That's when I knew that whatever was at the funeral home had followed me home. This actually made me upset. How could this thing come to my place where my children feel safe? My head was covered in soap, and I couldn't get the soap off fast enough, but from the corner of my eye, I could see a shadow of a person by the bathroom sink. By this time, the soap began to burn my eyes. I closed them tightly and rinsed them off as fast as I could. Fear began to work its way into my already taxed mind, and I was too scared to open my eyes again. With a loud shout, I screamed out, "Get out! You're not welcome here." And just like that, I felt a peace inside of me. I was able to finish up my shower. I put on fresh clothes and asked Leanne and the kids to smudge and pray with me, but I couldn't find my sage and other stuff. Leanne then asked me if I left them at the funeral home. "Think I did," I said. "Why don't you and the kids get ready and come with me to pick up my things?" I asked her. "Just go yourself. You don't want to take the kids over to that place," she said. "Leanne, I don't want to scare you, but we need those things here tonight," I said in a serious tone. We all piled into the van and drove the 4 or 5 miles back into town. In no time at all, we were sitting in the van in front of the funeral home. "Are you gonna get them? What are we even doing here?" my daughter asked me. It hit me. I was staring at the funeral home for just a few minutes without saying anything. Leanne then said, "Honey, just go and get them and let's get out of here." Something easier said than done. I inhaled deeply and started towards the front doors. I dug into my pocket to find my set of keys to the place. As I stepped into the building, the doors closed behind me with a loud bang. That's when I heard that same sound from the same room as before. I couldn't move. I'm not even sure how long I stood there, but Leanne walked in and asked me if I had gotten it. She said they had been waiting for 10 minutes and she thought something happened. That's when she looked at me. It's over here. Mike must have left it right here for you. And just like that, we got it and locked the doors and left back home. As we went back home, I started getting ready to smudge our home and all of us. I'm not even sure what's happening or why this thing is following us, but it's time to get rid of it. As I got everybody together, a knock came on the door. "Who is it?" I asked. "It's me, Jason. Can I come in?" "Come in, Jason. What's going on?" I said. "I thought I smelled some sage, and I just wanted to smudge with you and your family," he said. I told him that he was more than welcome, and we all sat down to pray. When we finished, Jason said that he wasn't getting much sleep in that trailer, that he kept hearing noises and just didn't feel safe. That's also why he wanted to come over and smudge, but he said he felt a lot better and was going to go back. I then told Jason to wait for me and that I could walk him back. I then told my kids to get ready to go to bed and that I would be right back. As we walked out, I offered him a smoke. "No thanks, man," he said, looking up at the stars. I lit one up and inhaled deeply. I was tempted to clue him in on what's been going on the last 2 days, but I didn't want to burden him with anything else. Plus, I'm sure he was going through some stuff at home. But before I could open my mouth to say anything, he started saying, "Angelo, man, I haven't been able to come with grips with something that I did. I mean, I've been worried about my family, about Kim." Kim was his little girl, by the way. He then started to pour out his heart to me. He went on about his work, his relationship with Kim's mom, Anna, how he can never satisfy her lust for worldly things. His words, not mine. I lit another smoke from my half pack. The sound of his voice drifted off as I began to relive the day's events and try to make sense of everything going on, lost in everything that was happening. I'm not sure how long we were out there for, but I couldn't get that strange feeling out of my mind and just how I had been feeling overall. That's when I almost swallowed my cigarette when my daughter Olivia shook my arm. "Dad, Mom's been calling you," she said. I then told Jason I had to head back inside and see what Leanne needed. "Thanks for listening, man. I really needed to just express that," Jason said as he went back into the trailer. "That's what friends are for. Just ask the Creator for help. He has everything in control. Rest up, and we'll see you in the morning." "Good night, Jason," I said. "Yeah, good night, man." "Hey, Dad, I think something's wrong with Jason. He doesn't seem like the Jason that I know," Olivia said. "I know, sweetie. He's been pretty quiet since I picked him up," I said. "How'd you even pick him up?" she asked me. "Grandma wanted to see me. She's having one of her warnings. I think she might be actually right this time." I gave Olivia a kiss on the forehead. "That's from Grandma," I said. She held my hand as we walked back in silence. I walked in and asked Leanne what happened. Leanne then put her finger to her mouth to tell me to be quiet. "Alright, y'all, let's put Barney on. You all can watch Barney for a while before bedtime," Leanne told the kids. "I don't want to watch Barney. Can I just go to my room?" Olivia said. "Alright, but leave your door open and listen for your brother and sister," Leanne said. Leanne then led me to our room. Nice, some action, I thought to myself. I was right, but it wasn't the action I expected. From our room, you could see into the trailer next to ours, the big one. "I don't want to scare the kids, but you need to see this," Leanne said as she turned off the lights and pulled back the curtains. I then looked out the window and into the big trailer. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "Just look," she said. She later told me that she was paralyzed and unable to speak as she saw the change on my face, not wanting to look again herself. I too was frozen in fear as I looked into a window of the trailer that was next to ours. I could see the window to a room. I'm not even sure how to describe the scene before me. I want to say shadows, but they were more solid than a shadow. It almost looked like shadows were moving inside of there. That's when 3 loud bangs on the back door flooded me with a new kind of fear. Our room was a partition built on the trailer that we lived in, and the back door was in our room. The dogs were hiding underneath our porch. They were more scared than I was. I could actually hear them crying and whimpering. I looked out the back door. Nothing. Nobody. Just silence. The little ones came screaming into our room, crying, just pointing down the hallway towards the living room. Leanne scooped them up just as Olivia came rushing into our room as well. "Mom, Dad, what's going on in here? Are you guys fighting?" she said. I reached out to close the curtains, but before I could close them, Olivia let out a scream. She was pointing at the window. I jumped up and looked but saw nothing. We then gathered up the kids into the living room. Everybody was crying and screaming at the same time. I knew I had to do something to try and calm down the kids. "Where's the smudge?" I was asking with no answer. I asked my little ones what happened. Reuben, my son, said, "Somebody was at the door trying to take my sister outside." It was then that I noticed our big female dog, Sandy. She was inside with us. Somehow her being with us made me feel safe. "Reuben, what do you mean someone? Was it Jason?" I asked. "No, he doesn't look like Jason," he said, holding his sister close to him and his mom. "Sandy chased him away," Reuben said. I went back to my room to get a flashlight and my .357 handgun. "Leanne, you and the kids stay in the living room." I locked the back door and pushed the dresser and bed against it. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I'm gonna go get Jason and go over to the big trailer," I said. "Lock the door behind me. Don't let anybody in, even me." "What do you mean, even you?" she said. I showed her my key as I walked out the door. As I made my way towards the 6th door, Jason was outside already. He had a big stick in his hands. I heard some noises and then I saw someone looking in your kitchen window. You're not gonna believe this, but when I got close enough to smack him with my stick, he just disappeared, he told me. I told Jason to stand guard by my trailer to keep a lookout for Leanne and the kids. "Where are you going?" Jason asked. "To our big trailer. I thought I saw someone over there," I said. As I got closer, that's when I could hear a bunch of people talking all at once, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was like a big crowd of people getting louder and louder. I could still hear them talking when I began to insert the key and turn the doorknob. As soon as I opened it, I expected to see a bunch of people, but when I pushed the door open, it was dark and quiet. All I could hear was the low hum of the fridge. I still went inside. You see, this big trailer was just a big kitchen with tables and chairs. We used it for our children's school as well. I walked in, expecting the worst. When I got about halfway in, the door closed behind me, and that familiar feeling I had felt once too many times the last 2 days came upon me again. I could feel eyes all around me in the small hallway leading to the bathroom. I felt pure evil, something I had never felt before or since. I was about to go down the hallway. Instead, I turned and looked out the window straight into my bedroom. I was now standing where I had seen the shadows moving earlier. As I looked into our bedroom, I saw somebody. Well, something I'm never gonna forget. I couldn't shout to warn my wife and children. It had holes where you would expect eyes. But when it looked at you, you just knew it could see as well. I broke out in a sweat and felt like throwing up. It had me in some kind of spell. I couldn't move. It smiled at me and turned to go into the living room. I tried to will my feet to move, but my own body wouldn't respond to what my brain was telling it to do. Even my mouth couldn't speak. I tried shouting at Jason, but my whole body shut down and gave in to fear. It was like I was just watching myself. "Move, your family's in there with that thing," I said to myself. That's when I felt movement in my hands. Then I saw a bright flash of light, followed by a loud blast. I somehow fired the pistol I had in my hand, missing my right foot by inches. That forced my feet into action, and within seconds, I was at my front porch pounding on the door. Leanne and Olivia were on the inside. leaning with their combined weight against the door, determined not to let anybody inside. "Babe, it's me. Move away from the door." With that, she knew it was me. I flung the door open. Ruben was standing behind them, crying. I rushed past Ruben, looking for my baby girl, Angela. That's when Leanne screamed, "Angela!" She kept repeating as we all ran into the living room. We met Jason coming down the hallway. He was carrying Angela out of the room that she shared with Olivia. Leanne threw her hands around Angela, asking her if she was okay. Angela wouldn't let go of Jason, as Leanne tried to pull her away from him. "Come here, baby. Mommy's got you," Leanne said as she tried to take her from Jason again. Meanwhile, Olivia kept her little brother close by her side. We all then went to the living room to try to pull ourselves together. Jason sat on the couch with Olivia and Ruben. Leanne sat in the easy chair holding Angela's hand. I went to close the front door, locked it, and returned inside. "Did you guys see it? What do you..." I was cut off by the barking of our dogs outside, right at our front door. I noticed Sandy and looking at Jason straight into the eyes. "Jason, how did you get in here?" No response. "Jason, how did you get in here?" I said as I slowly cocked the gun in my hand. "I thought I saw someone in your back room. The door was locked, so I went to the back door and couldn't get in. When I looked through the window, something was in there moving to the front rooms, so I crawled in through the window," he said. "I then saw the baby girl run to that room. I grabbed her, and that's when we met in the hallway." My heart was pounding as he explained. I turned to get my smudge in my room. I found it exactly where I had left it and went back to the others. "Before we do anything, is everybody fine?" I asked. "Are you gonna smudge again? I don't think that's gonna work. I mean, how many times have you tried that stuff? And this thing is still here. We need to pray to God," Leanne said. "Whatever this thing is messing with me since I got sick. I'm not sure what to do. I'll try anything," I told Leanne, but lit up the smudge anyway. I was thinking Leanne expected me to pray. Instead, she started praying in a loud voice. When she started to pray, that's when the dogs went crazy outside, barking through their noses. A couple by our back door and a couple in front. The water in the bathroom turned on by itself. Sandy ran in the hallway and started to bark like crazy and snapping like somebody was there. The lights turned on and off as Leanne prayed louder and louder. Looking back, it was almost like one of those scenes from those demonic possession movies out in Hollywood. But this was the real deal. Leanne continued praying, rebuking this evil spirit, commanding it back to hell, back to where it came from. I then pulled Jason aside and told him we needed to do something. How do you or what do you do against a ghost, a spirit, or whatever this thing is? That's when we heard the sounds of something, like somebody was running on top of our trailer. I felt useless. I was supposed to be the protector of my family, the brave one, the strong one, but instead, this thing reduced me to the state of being a kid again, thinking like one. At least it helped in this. I shouted out, "Call the police." "Are you serious? They'll think we're crazy. They're not gonna believe us," Jason said. Suddenly, it became quiet. Leanne and the kids were still praying. Leanne looked up at me. The look in her eyes was telling me, "What are we gonna do?" We all jumped as the phone began to ring. I picked up the receiver and put it in my ear. It was Mom calling, but I couldn't hear her very well. Mom, I can't even hear you. Mom, we got a bad connection. Hello? Hey," I tried to say to her. Then, a bunch of static. The phone crackled a little bit. Then it went dead. Don't tell me. The phone died. "Call her back," Leanne said. I then hanged up the phone, picked it up, and put it in my ear again. Except this time, there wasn't even a dial tone. "What's going on? Did she answer?" I shook my head no. "Not even a dial tone," I said. But I gave it another try. Still no dial tone. "That's right, the car," I thought. "I can use the phone there," I told her. I dug in my pocket for my keys and started out the door. "You guys better come with me," I said. Jason went out first with Angela, Ruben, Olivia, and Leanne all followed Jason. Even our 4 other dogs formed like an escort around us, with Sandy bringing up the rear. We felt safe with the dogs at our side, one safe inside the car. I told Leanne that we should go spend the night in Browning. She agreed. What about a change of clothes? Olivia, who was very quiet up to that point, spoke up. I don't want to go back in there, Mom. I'm not going in there. In the big trailer was our washer and dryer as well. I have some of our clothes clean and folded in that laundry basket on top of the dryer, Leanne said. The child in me cried. I really didn't want to go back in there. I handed Leanne my pistol, and I told her I would be right back. She turned to Jason. Jason, can you please go with Angelo? Please? He didn't say anything. He just opened the car door and got out. Just grab the whole basket. You don't need to grab anything else, she called out as we walked to the big trailer. Man, when I came in here, it felt strange. And this is from where I saw it. Whatever the fuck this thing is, we need to hurry and get it, I told him. When we got to the door, Jason stopped me from going inside. You wait here, man. I'll get the basket, Jason said. I hit the light switch, and the big kitchen lit up. I could still feel the evil inside. He walked into the laundry room and came out with the clothes without incident. I turned off the lights and we went back to the car. That's when Jason stopped and looked at me with a strange look. What's going on, Jason? I said. Angelo, I'm not going with you, man, he said. Jason, I can't leave you here alone, not after what just happened. What if it comes back? I told him. Listen, you have to level with me. What's going on, man? Once again, he said, You just won't understand. I just locked myself in my room until morning. After going back and forth for a while, seeming like he was set on his choice to stay. And the only reason I agreed was because I saw Sandy licking his hand. You should let Sandy sleep in your room. She's a good watchdog. And he said thank you. On the way to Browning, Leanne was upset at me for leaving Jason behind. He didn't want to come in, honey. I tried to tell him to come with us, but he wouldn't. I was trying to explain. She then picked up the phone and said, You need to call your mom. We should also get a room and put the kids to bed. Then I'll give her a call, wondering if I should go back for him. Leanne, what do you think? Should we go back for Jason? I expected her to say yes, but before she could answer, all the kids started to cry out. Please, don't go back there. Let's just stay here. We checked into a hotel. After paying for our room and getting the kids in bed, Leanne picked up the phone and called my mom. She then began to tell her everything that's been going on since my trip to Great Falls, up to our current situation. As she spoke with her, I paced the floor thinking about Jason. There was something that kept telling me to go back, and to insist on him either going home. His family must be worried about him. It wasn't the first time he spent a day or two over here with us, except this time, it just felt different. I started putting my jacket back on. Leanne told my mom to hold on for a minute and said to me, Where are you going? I need to go back out there and make Jason go home, or at least come with us or something. I don't feel right just leaving him there, I told her. As I walked out, I could hear her telling my mom that I was going back for Jason. And so I did. As I drove past the funeral home, I swear I saw a silhouette of a person in one of the windows. Screw you. I then started down the boarding school road. I could see our place. It looked like all the lights were on in all the trailers. Some of them were blinking, except for the one that Jason was in. There was no light. I wasn't about to go back into any of the trailers to see what was going on when I got there. Just as I pulled in, all the lights went out. That's when my phone began to ring. It was Leanne. Fuck, I shouted to myself, my heart pounding again. Where are you? She said. I just got here. I'm gonna pull around to the 6th door and honk. I don't want to get out of the car, I told her. Listen, your mom said she's been trying to reach us for a couple of days, except that every time that she calls, someone ends up laughing and hangs up the phone, or they just whisper stuff real fast. She also said that she's been having nightmares. She hears the same whispering, like 2 or 3 people whispering at once, to where you can't even understand what's being said. As she was telling me what Mom said, I was honking the horn to get Jason's attention. What else did she say? Did she say why she was calling in the first place? I asked. Yeah, she wanted to know who the person was that you picked up. The body. She wants to talk to you. And get this. She also said, don't let Jason leave your place. I can't leave him out here alone. What if something happens to him? Whatever this thing is, it's out to get someone. Leanne, this stuff doesn't happen for no reason, I said. Plus, he's not even coming out. I need to see if he's okay, I told her. Before I got out of the car, I noticed the dogs weren't around. I rolled the window down and called to them. Sandy, come here, girl. 3 times I called. Whenever I would call her, she would just come running. I left the lights of the car pointing towards Jason's door. Jason, it's me, I shouted again as I walked to the 6th door. The headlights of the car cast my shadow in front of me as I approached the door. I heard dogs barking, dogs in the distance, but I couldn't tell if they were our dogs. When I got to the door, that icy cold feeling came over me again, except this time, something was different. An awful smell filled the air, the smell of human waste and burning matches. The hair on the back of my neck and arms stood on end. I felt nauseous. Jason, I yelled again. Jason, are you in there? I said. I tried the door. It was locked. I then reached for the key. Then I realized that they were on the keychain in the car. I stepped off the small porch and half ran back to the car to get the key to open the door. When I got to the car, the phone started ringing again. Is he coming in? Remember what your mom said. Don't let him leave. Leanne told me just as I looked up at the door. What I saw next was a shadow on the trailer, as if someone was standing between the car and the front of Jason's door. I dropped the phone and put the car in reverse. I was on the road in no time flat. I stopped on the road and shouted back towards the trailers for Jason, honking the horn as well. Every time that I shouted Jason's name, someone would shout it back. It seemed like an echo of my voice. I heard Leanne speaking, so I picked up the phone. She wanted to know what was going on. I told her what happened, and she said to just come back. At this point, I felt terrible for leaving Jason there, and where the hell are my dogs at? When I got back to the hotel, Leanne didn't want to know what happened. She needed to know, and after explaining to her, she said, why don't we just try to get some rest and try to figure all this out in the morning? She talked me into it, since I hadn't slept well. I ended up knocking out when I hit the pillow. Most of the day was gone when I woke up. Leanne said she paid for another night at the hotel. The little ones seemed to be their playful selves. Olivia was still asleep. I quickly got dressed and told Leanne I couldn't believe she didn't wake me up. She then said, I've been calling back home. I thought Jason might answer. Maybe he left back home when I got there. It's daytime, and the veil is not so thin out here during the day. So I decided that I was going to confront Jason to see what's going on. Because apparently, according to my mom, there's also something going on with him. So the first thing I did was go back home and see if Jason was fine. It must have taken me about 10 minutes to get there. I found him in the room, sitting, staring out the window. Jason, are you good? I gave him a little shake. He then finally said, yeah, just a little stiff. You got some calls from Mike, he said. Leanne's been trying to reach you all day, dude. She said you weren't answering the phone, I said. I was over in the big trailer in the morning. I didn't answer the phone. I just heard the messages that he sent, he replied. Jason, do you want to go home now? I asked him. He just shook his head no and laid down. I never told him what Mom said, and I didn't even ask him again. I was going to tell him, or asking him what's going on, but I figured that he might just tell me. Eventually, I went to my trailer to get some stuff for Leanne and the kids. I went inside and turned on the answering machine. 3 messages from Mike. He asked if I could return his call, that he was extra busy. The second one, he was begging me to call him back ASAP. And last, that the family of the motor vehicle accident guy decided to move the funeral to that afternoon, and that he was way behind, so I called him back. All of a sudden, it got icy cold, so I took my ass out of there as fast as I could. As I left, I just put the phone down. I didn't even hang it up. I just wanted to get out of there. I went to see if Jason wanted to go home or just take a ride with me. Then I remember what Mom told Leanne. Not sure what to do. I ended up asking Jason anyway. Nah, it's kind of peaceful out here. Think I'll stick around for a while, he said. Peaceful? Were you even here last night? If that's peaceful to you, Jason, I hate to be around you when you think things aren't being peaceful. I walked back to the car and pulled away. On the way back, I picked up the phone and tried Mike again. So-and-so funeral home. This is Mike speaking. Can I help you? Hey Mike, it's me, Angelo. What's going on? I asked him. Hey Angelo, everything's crazy over here, man. Can you come over? I know you're supposed to have the day off. I really need you. The funeral for the guy in the MVA was scheduled for tomorrow, but the family moved it up for today. I can be there in about an hour, I said. Alright, it would be great if you can be here sooner though. Just try to get here as soon as you can. Sounding disappointed, I hung up and gave Leanne a phone call. Hey sweetie, Mike needs me to go in today, but I want to go see Anna. Alright, I sent the kids out to go see your mom. I had David and Wilma pick them up, she said. Alright, I'll be there in a few. I then hung up. When I pulled into the parking lot of the hotel, Leanne was in the small lobby waiting. We got some coffee on the way to Anna and Jason's house. Does she know we're coming over? Leanne asked. I didn't think about calling her. I just thought she should know Jason was at our place. I'm sure she's kind of worried about him, despite whatever they got going on. I also thought that maybe we could just go over to see if she knows what's bugging her husband. Her car wasn't in the driveway, so we kept on driving. This town isn't very big. If you carefully plan your way, you can see the whole town in one drive-through. We spent about 15 minutes looking for Anna without any luck. Leanne suggested that we drive to Jason's mom and dad's place. Jim, who is Jason's dad, was outside working on his truck. We both got out of the car and went up to Jim. Well, howdy, what brings you guys here? Are y'all looking for my son as well? We're actually looking for Anna. Just wanted to talk to her. Well, you just missed her. She dropped Kim off 10 minutes ago. Said she was gonna go look for Jason. I was about to tell Jim that Jason was at our place when Leanne turned and started walking to the car. You know what? I think I know where she is, I said to Jim. Well, if you see my son, tell him to come back home. Jim said, Will do, sir. Thanks for everything. We got in the car and pulled out of their driveway. Where are we going now? I said. All Leanne said was to drive out to Last Star Homes. So that's where I went. The funeral home was on the way. So I told Leanne that I wanted to stop and check in on Mike. When we got there, Leanne said that she would wait in the car. I walked into the office and called out Mike's name. Angelo, is that you? Yeah, it's me, I said as I followed his voice to the kitchen. He was having a cup of coffee and a donut. Did you already come to get started? I actually wasn't expecting you for a while, he said. I just wanted to make sure you're going to be fine for a bit. Leanne and I are looking for a friend right now. It's kind of important, I said just as Leanne walked in. I found her. She's at Jim's place. He told her we were looking for her. She said if we came back or called, she would wait for us back home. Sorry, Mike. How you been? Leanne said. But I can pull through as long as you give me my help back. Knowing Leanne was about to drag me out. I'll be back as soon as I can, I said as we rushed out. We ran back to the car and hurried back to Anna's house. How did you know where she was back at Jim's? I asked. Leanne picked up the phone and waved it to me. She then said, What are you going to tell Anna? Well, I'll just let her know that Jason's at our place and see what's going on. He won't tell me. Anna might know. The rest of the way to their house was silence. Her car was in the driveway, still running. We knocked on the door. The door's open. Anna shouted over the radio. Hey you guys, I was just over at Jason's dad picking up Kim. Jim said you guys were looking for me. What's up? I spoke up and asked Anna if things were alright with Jason and herself. We had an argument the other day. He stormed out. I haven't seen him since then. Did he come over and cry on your shoulder? I know both of you are close, she joked. No, he didn't. But he did say that he was worried about you and Kim, and that he was also worried about his family. I just thought that you might know what's going on, I asked her. We were fighting about money, as always. I got really mad at him. Then he up and left. I haven't talked to him, she continued. Why? When did he tell you that? She asked. He told me a few days ago. I was trying to think of an excuse to leave when Leanne spoke and changed the subject. The other reason was to see if you were going to bring Kim out to Olivia's birthday party. Just let me know. I'll be there, she said. I better get this guy to work, or we might start fighting over money as well, Leanne said. They both started laughing. I told Leanne to drop me off at the funeral home. I then gave Leanne a kiss before she drove away. Be careful out there now. Try not to be alone, she said. I walked in. Mike was loading things we needed at the funeral site. Hey Mike, I'm back. What do you need me to do? I asked Mike. Just help me load everything in the Suburban. You drive the pallbearers. I'll drive the hearse. We left the funeral home. I knew the routine. I went to the gravesite. Mike went to the home and would drive the body to the church. Meanwhile, I would set everything up at the gravesite. I finished up and met Mike at the house and waited for the man. Everything seemed to go along good so far. No eerie feelings. No chills. No cold air. No evil sounds. Mike then waved me into the house to help carry out the flowers and flower stands. When I entered, I felt that cold feeling again. I looked around at the friends and family to see if they noticed anything wrong. Nobody seemed to notice. The pallbearers were forming a human chain and passed different types of flower arrangements. After the last person said their goodbye and went outside, Mike and I started to close the casket. I was sweating by then, shaky, and a little queasy. Some of the ladies were crying, a mournful cry. It was a sad moment for them. I could feel their pain. Mike then put the casket key in the casket and locked the covers in place. I thought I heard a knock coming from inside of the casket. I looked at Mike, expecting him to be in the shock that I was in, but he just continued to go about his work. Mike, did you hear something? I asked. He shook his head no. Let's focus on getting done here. Be professional, he said without looking at me. He knew I was somewhat scared, ever since the other night. Everyone was in their vehicles or getting inside, while the pallbearers loaded up the casket. I got behind the wheel of the Suburban as the pallbearers went in. Surprisingly, they were in a good mood, cracking jokes and overall cheerful. Then one of them spoke up and started to talk about the night before at the wake. Did you guys hear what happened? He said. Man, I was there. What went on? Said somebody else. Just a few of us were up last night. Some guy walked in. Nobody knew him, but he knew us by name. And he kept asking for somebody named Jason, and if we knew where he was. Jason? Somebody else said. Jason who? The only Jason I know is that guy married to Anna, he said to the others. We got to the church before I could hear any more. I waited outside the church, smoked a few cigarettes. This shit is unreal, I was thinking to myself. Just then, Leanne pulled up. In a small town like this, everybody knows where everybody is at. Your mom's on the phone. She wants to talk to you, Leanne said. I went down the steps of the church to talk on the phone. Hey Mom, how are my cats doing? Are they good? I asked her. Don't worry about them. They're good. But listen up. Your friend Jason, he's in big trouble. You need to talk some sense into him before he leaves your place. He didn't leave yet, did he? She asked. No, at least I don't think so. But what kind of trouble? I asked her. It's not from this world. It's from that other place I told you about when you were a kid. When you're done, go to him. I'll be praying for you, my son. Be strong. Don't waver. Don't give in to fear. I know you don't believe the way that I do, but we worship the same God. You just call him Creator. I call him Jesus. I love you. Now be strong. With that, she hung up. What did she say? Leanne asked. Most likely the same thing she told you, I said. She didn't tell me anything. She just said to bring the phone to you. I then told her what Mom said. The service was over, and people began to come out of the church. The funeral was long even though the ride was short. I started to feel uneasy again and didn't know why. Then, that's when I saw him, just standing there, looking at me. He didn't even blink. I tried to walk around to get a better look at him, but every time that I moved, it was always on the other side of the crowd. I was thankful that the gravesite service wasn't very long. After people started leaving, we began to load up all the equipment back into the Suburban. I followed Mike back into the funeral home, and then I unloaded everything. As I was putting stuff away, Mike was talking to me, but my mind was somewhere else. "Angelo, are you listening?" Mike asked me. "Man, I'm sorry. I was thinking about something else," I said. "I guess so. What's eating at you?" I told him that I would let him know once I figure everything out. "Man, why are you so busy anyway? What's been going on? It didn't seem like you needed me in the first place." He then pointed to the cooler and said, "We have another guest. Can you stay and give me a hand?" "Mike, I can't, man. I need to get home. A friend of mine is in trouble," I said, feeling a bit guilty. "But come first thing in the morning," Mike said. We said our goodnights and I went to the office to call Leanne. She picked me up. We went to the room and talked about what to do. I decided to go home and talk to Jason, and Leanne was going to wait with the children. I did a lot of searching myself as I drove home. Once I got there, I unlocked the big trailer. I could hear echoes of the night before. I spotted the location in the floor as I stood in the spot, just like the night before. When I looked into my room, trying to picture that thing in my mind, then it hit me. That thing that was in my room, he was the one at the gravesite today. That's when I ran to the 6th door. Jason was exactly the same as I left him, laying on his bed. "Jason, we need to talk, man." He didn't argue with me. "Let's go over to the big trailer." We went over and sat down at one of the tables. "Jason, man, you need to spill the beans. What happened? I'm not gonna take no for an answer," I said. He just sat there, not saying anything. All he talked about was his family, about Kim and Anna, how he loves his family, how they always been there for him. "Jason, dude, I need to know exactly what you did." He looked at me. "I never hurt anyone, if that's what you're worried about," he said. "Well, do you want to be with your family? Do you want everything to work out for you? Your family is worried about you. Anna and Kim are looking for you. Do you love them?" "I always have," he said. "Let's go home. No matter what's broken, you can fix it," I said to him. "Home," he mumbled. "I'll take you right now, Jason," I said. "Someone's looking for you all over town. I think he was here last night. I'm not even sure what stopped him, and I don't know if we can stop him if he comes back," I told him. Mind you, at this point I'm practically begging him. When he finally said, "Alright, let's go." We got into the car. I was actually surprised. As we got into town, I told him I was going to make one stop. We pulled into the funeral home. I was about to go in and talk to Mike when Jason said, "Hey, Angelo, I know you're a busy man, so I really appreciate everything, hanging out with me and listening." He then walked up to me. He hugged me, and then he said, "Thanks for everything. I'm good now. I think I'm gonna walk home from here. That way you don't gotta drive me." "Are you sure, man?" I said. He looked at me and said, "Yeah, I'm good now. Thanks for everything again." I then told him to take care and be good. I then went inside. "Hey, I thought you went home. You know the guy that we put in the ground today? Well, he crashed trying to avoid hitting the guy we have in our back room. He didn't swerve in time though. Still ended up hitting him. They found him in some ditch last night. The highway patrol went to investigate the crash, and that's when they found him. We walked to the back room, and there he was, laying on the table. It was Jason. I have only shared this with a few people, and still, when I think about it, it just freaks me out. And growing up in a small town, exploring it in the hills was the thing to do. This incident took place at the north end of Ruby Valley in Elko County, Nevada. Someday I will play around on Google Maps to try to find this place, but it's slightly on the north road of Highway 93. that goes into the Ruby Valley. I have always liked checking out old mine shafts and ghost towns. That stuff really intrigues me. At the Burger Bar in Wells, Nevada, where I am from and where I grew up, they had these old turn-of-the-century maps under glass on the tables, and one of them showed several ghost towns just north of Ruby Valley. So I figured I would go check them out, as I had not been in the area very often. I gassed up my '72 Dodge pickup and grabbed my HK91 and I set out. I had found some old foundations in the lower country and started heading into the mountains themselves, and I started finding some old abandoned mine shafts. It was pretty cool, to be honest, so I kept going up. I took this old road that was no more than an overgrown cattle path at this point in history, and that came upon a tree blocking the road. It was an old pine, about 2 feet in diameter, and it was blocking the road. After this tree and the road continued straight for about 200 yards, and then it hooked right before coming back again 180 degrees. I parked my truck in front of the tree, and I started to set out on foot. I grabbed my HK with one 20-round magazine in the rifle, and I put a 20-round mag in my back left pocket. I always had a rifle with me, as I have encountered a lot of mountain lions and mine shafts before, and just generally, I like to shoot targets and stuff. So I get up on the ridge lines and I'm shooting at this big boulder from a couple hundred yards away. As soon as I climbed down over the fallen tree, I had this really creepy feeling as if somebody was watching me. I continue on for 200 yards, to the point where the road started curving right and gaining elevation. And when it did, it was going towards this cabin that was up the hill. At this point, I realized that not only did I feel like somebody was watching me, it was also really quiet. This was in June or so. School had just got out. Everywhere you went, you could hear those old cicadas, but not out here. It seemed like as soon as I crossed the fallen tree, the mountains became silent. No bugs or birds, nothing, just deafening silence. As I came up to the turn, there was this big rock. The thing had to be about 15 feet in diameter. You could tell that it used to be on the road, but because of years of erosion and all that stuff, it had slid down just slightly off the road. It seemed to be red limestone, I think, or something like that. It stood out since they are not quite that common in this area. I looked at the rock, and you could tell that there were some carvings in it at some point in time. But again, because of weathering, whatever was carved in it had been worn off. I kept walking up the road. I was really creeped out, but I really wanted to check out that old cabin up there, as it was pretty obvious that no one had been there in a long time. At this point, I was maybe 3 hours off road to get to this point. Eventually, I did get up to the cabin. As far as abandoned houses and cabins in Nevada go, this one was actually in pretty good shape. All of the glass on the windows was still intact, and there was some evidence of curtains behind the windows. By this point, there was something in the back of my mind telling me that I should keep on going. I went into the cabin, and that's where I started to get the feeling that something was off again. Most cabins you find out in the middle of nowhere in Nevada are empty. There's nothing really left in them. Maybe a bit of broken chairs and couches and stuff. But this one was completely furnished. Time had taken its toll, but everything was still there. What was left of an old mattress and some bedding was still there as well. There were plates and other cookware throughout the house, along with these tattered clothing and personal artifacts such as a chest and faded pictures. And what really creeped me out was at the dinner table. It was still set for people. Dinner plates, glasses, and silverware. This was the first cabin that I have ever found that was in this condition. It was as if whoever resided here had just got up and left and chose to leave everything behind. I felt like I shouldn't be in the cabin, and I went outside to see if I could find a mine shaft or anything else. Once I was out the door, I decided to chamber around into my HK. The sound of me rocking around echoed throughout the canyon and broke the eerie silence. As little of a thing as it was, This actually helped calm my nerves down a bit. And now, directly behind the cabin, was a well. It was still intact. As I got closer, it sounded like there was some noise coming from it, like a slight breeze rustling through it or something. When I got about 30 feet of this, I started to smell something, and it smelled pretty bad, putrid almost, and I figured there was definitely some animal that had died in the well. The smell of something decaying was heavy in the air with this other scent that I couldn't identify that tore my nostrils. I didn't want to get any closer to the well, and I started leaning towards the left where I could see the opening to a mine shaft up on the hill. The closer I got to it, I could feel the breeze coming out of it. This is not really uncommon if you explore mine shafts before, as the breeze could be coming in from another opening in the mine. But the thing was, it was perfectly calm. As far as I could see, there were no trees moving or any signs of the wind. The closer I got to the opening of the mine shaft, the more of a feeling of that dread and being watched I got. I got within 15 feet of the shaft when the smell hit me again. That same smell of decay, but it was much stronger than the well. Right then, all of my spidey senses started going off. I knew it was time to get out of there. I started turning left to book it out of there when I saw a dark shadow moving in the opening of the mine shaft. Whatever it was, it appeared to be crouched down to fit into the mine shaft, as most that I have seen are about 8 to 10 foot ceilings. At first I thought it was a mountain lion, but then I remember how big these mine shafts were. My mind raced trying to process and think of what the hell this was. It was too big to be a black bear, which are also rare in northeastern Nevada. I nearly froze with panic, and it slowly kept coming towards the opening of the mine shaft. It was maybe within 10 feet of the opening, and the light was starting to show just whatever this was. It was covered, from head to toe, in grayish brown fur. Then, it screamed at me. It was unlike anything I ever heard in my entire life. My ears were ringing. I flipped into panic mode and I did what any good person would do. I started shooting at it. I pulled up my HK, placed the front blade on what appeared to be its center of mass, and ripped off 5 rounds as fast as I could. If you ever shot a big game with a large caliber rifle, you know the sound when you connect with something. I had 4 solid hits and 1 round that went just a little too high. Then it made the scream even louder than it had before in pain. At this time, I started hearing more and separate screams coming from all over the well and from the hills above the mine shaft. That's when I started running down the hill as fast as I could. And the tree line above the road, about 75 to 125 yards, I could see fast movement. The rocks were tumbling down the hill, and there were several other screams from the mine shaft. Whatever it was, I had definitely connected, and it was hurting. But whatever was up in the tree line, they were running from tree to tree on all 4s, getting closer to me. As I ran towards the rock, I was shooting in the general vicinity of the movement on top of the hill. By the time I got to the limestone rock, I had expended a 20-round mag. I ripped it out and put my spare mag in and chamber around, and I started running towards the fallen tree, about 200 yards away by now. I kept looking back, and whatever they were staying in the trees. I could make out their masses and fur, but they wouldn't stay in the open. I got back to the fallen tree, and I fell on the dirt trying to jump over it. I got up off my ass, and I fired between 12 and 15 rounds at the closest movement, which was about 50 yards away from me now. I heard a few rounds connect, and I started screaming. Between the screaming and the gunshots, my ears were damn near deaf. I opened the door of my truck and I started the fucking thing as fast as I could, backing up to turn around. I damn near put my truck down in the canyon, and as I started to leave on the road that I had came in, that's when I finally got to look at one of them. It was crouched over with its front feet on the tree. It was covered in head to toe in grayish brownish fur, and had long slender fingers with claws tipping them off. The back of it was hunched over, and the face was slender. almost looking like that of a badger but with more sunken eyes. It was shaking its head back and forth, and it sounded like he was attempting to yell at me again, or speak, or something. It was the scariest scream ever. But with the noise of my truck, I could not make out just what the hell it was, or what the hell it was trying to do, or say. I averaged about 50 to 60 miles per hour on a shitty dirt road that I had done 15 on the way up, but I didn't slow down until I got back to the pavement. By now, I was so shaken that I had to stop and collect myself. I got back to town, and I was in a bit of shock. My dad was basically an expert in the Ruby Mountains for about 20 years. He asked me how my trip went. He could tell I was startled and asked where I had been. I told him that I had been north of Ruby Valley, and he got quiet and asked if I had seen a cabin with a fallen tree over the road. I told him yes. He looked me in the eyes and told me that it's somewhere that I should never, ever go again, especially by myself. He wouldn't speak about it after that, and to honor that, I have never been back there. It's part of the reason why I live in the west side of Nevada now. But in the back of my mind, there was something telling me that I should go back. And maybe one day, I will go back. This was back in 2001, before camera phones. I was too broke to afford a digital camera, so I want to go back with the camera. Maybe a GoPro on my helmet, and with several friends that have rifles. Just something about there, even with the shit that I experience, is actually drawing me back. One day I will go back. I'll draw a sketch. My drawing skills are really shitty, so this is just gonna be a rough sketch. And I did try researching it, but this was a few years ago. I was asking some old timers, and one of them told me a story about the rubies. I'll say it really quickly. During the 40s and 50s, the US Army was operating out of the Wendover Air Base. Every now and then, during fucked up weather, a B-25, B-17, or a B-29 would smack the rubies because of poor visibility. Some of the local ranchers got recruited to help the military go up to a crash site during the winter to recover the bodies. The rancher that I was talking to told me that it took them around 3 days to get up to where this crash was. He said that when they got to the wreckage, all of the crew members were laid out side by side, next to each other, in a clearing in the wreckage. Many of them were missing arms and legs, and it was obvious that all of them died on impact somehow. Keep in mind that this was about 10,000 feet above sea level, and the bodies were laying next to each other. Did you know that the flute was a traditional instrument that the natives first used when they first settled in? It's said that the Skinwalker uses the flute to communicate with the spirits in other planes or dimensions. I was working on a ranch in Chinle one summer, near Canyon de Chelly. It was a fairly big spread, a couple 100 acres at least. We had been having problems with coyotes getting into the sheep pens at night. The guy that I was working for, Dwayne, sent me and his middle son, he was about 17, out to make sure the gate on the corral at the southern end of the property was closed. The younger boy, he was maybe 11, wanted to come with us as well, so we let him jump in the back of the Jeep. It was after dark. The drive out there was a good 10 or 15 minutes. Dwayne's kid was behind the wheel. I was sitting in the passenger seat, my head back and my eyes half closed, just enjoying the cool night air and the quietness. When we got there, Dwayne's kid, his name was Jay, sent his little brother, Aaron, out to check the gate. It was only 20 or so yards off the road and to the far side of some posts with chicken wire. My eyes were still kind of closed when I heard some whistling, but it wasn't like a person. It was more like the sound of a flute, the reed kind with the holes punched through it. It was a simple tune, but it was deep. That's when out of nowhere, Jay starts yelling for Aaron to get back in the Jeep. And it's like he's not kidding. Just the way he was yelling, basically screaming at him, caused me to jump up, and it had my heart racing, as if something bad was about to happen. He kept asking me, his voice in near panic, "Do you hear that?" Sounds like some kind of flute," I said. Just at that moment, Aaron launches himself into the back of the Jeep, his eyes wide open and looking as if he is ready to cry. Jay turns the key, and practically before the engine turns on, he's got his weight on the gas pedal like he's afraid it's going to push back. The wheel starts spinning, dirt and pebbles are flying all over the place. No sooner does Jay get us in motion, when the sound of this flute is right there, as if whoever is playing it is just there in the dark. But I couldn't see a damn thing. As soon as we get back to the ranch house, the two boys run in and tell Dwayne what happened. The next day he goes into the settlement and comes back with a medicine man. The old guy spends more than half the day going around and blessing every part of the ranch. When he leaves, he tells us to be careful and to not go out alone at night. He said he is sure that there's a skinwalker going around. This doesn't have any off-the-charts action like some stories you might hear, but this is something that did make me reconsider living in the remote areas. I went camping with two of my buddies about 7 years back. We were backpacking out in the deep woods of Montana. Every day we would wake up, hike until about noon, and then find a place to camp for the night, and spend the rest of the daylight hours fishing or shooting cans with a BB gun. All of us actually had real guns. But as you know, ammo isn't cheap, and we wanted them only for emergencies. We had a great first few days. On the fourth day, we must have been about 50 miles from the nearest road. We decided that this would be as far as we go, and tomorrow we would head back the way we came. We were pretty high up on a hill at this point, and we had a lovely view of the landscape. We found what seemed to be the concrete foundation of a long since demolished fire watch station, and decided that it would be the perfect place to camp. We made a fire, and then we went to sleep. It was still pretty early, but we were all tired as hell. Later that night, I woke up to go pee. I walked out to the edge of the concrete platform, and it was basically pitch black outside. The stars were beautiful though. I remember pointing my flashlight down the hill the way we came, because I didn't want to point it at the tents and wake up my friends. The flashlight was pretty weak, one of those real heavy ones with a dark yellow light that only lights up about 30 feet in front of you. I could barely make out what I thought was a deer moving across the path that we took up the hill, but it was too far for my flashlight to really hit it, and there were about a dozen trees in the way, so I only saw a few flashes of it. After a few seconds, I saw that it was actually not a deer. It was a person. And I started to freak out because I assumed it was a ranger that was about to give us hell for having a fire without a permit. Every time I looked back, this person was a couple feet closer to me, and I could hear them taking slow steps whenever I looked down, attempting to control my stream. I didn't realize it at this time how strange it would be for a ranger to be wandering around here without a flashlight at 2 in the morning, but I was tired. I could only still barely make out the rough shape of him within the darkness with my really crappy flashlight, but I finished up my business and then pointed the flashlight back at the person. He wasn't moving towards us anymore. I yelled out to them and asked if they needed something, but I got no response. At this point, my buddies were awake, and they came out of their tents to see what was going on. One of them had a much more powerful flashlight than I did, and he pointed it to where I was pointing mine. It lit up the person, and we could see him pretty clearly now. He was tall, but fairly lanky, and about 6.5 feet tall. And something was indeed wrong with this person. They had sideways facial features. They weren't bloody or anything. It's not like he was attacked by a bear and it just rearranged his face, but his eyes were just sideways, and the mouth was also sideways. He was staring directly at us, and starting to smile pretty hard, even though I'm not sure if I would actually consider it smiling, because it basically was just baring its teeth at us and maintaining eye contact. It was still pretty far away, maybe about 100 feet, but we could still see its face pretty clearly. Its eyes were wide, open enough for us to see the whites. We were all pretty shocked, obviously, and one of my buddies pointed his gun at him. As soon as this thing saw the gun, it just sort of coughed or gurgled. It sounded kind of like when someone is choking. It turned around but kept looking at us over its shoulder as it moved back the way it came from. It wasn't making any sort of effort to stay hidden, and with the bright light from my buddy, we watched it walk off into the woods for about 10 minutes, until we couldn't see it anymore. All of us were freaking out and we quickly packed up our camp and let the fire die down. But that was the scariest part, to be honest. Not seeing this thing first, but packing up the camp basically in the dark, because we couldn't hold our flashlights and look at the woods around us. In the meantime, we heard plenty of noises, and the entire time we felt like this thing was going to sprint out of the darkness. But it never did. We had our rifles out until daylight. Then we hiked faster than I ever hiked, and we got out of the woods. We hiked so fast that we were out by noon. We threw our stuff into the truck and drove 90 miles per hour, checking the mirrors every 10 seconds. We never saw that thing again. Once we were back in town, we all recounted exactly what we had all seen to each other, and our descriptions of this thing's face were all exactly the same. Very wide eyes, sideways features. It never attacked us. The woods didn't fall silent. This thing didn't smell like its flesh was rotting. It was just strange, bizarre. It looked wrong, and it also moved wrong. And the scariest part was when we couldn't see it at all, because we didn't know if it was going to be right next to us. And we didn't need to fire any warning shots, even though we were all thinking about doing it. As soon as it saw the gun, it started backing away. Maybe other people or other campers had fired at it before, and it understood what it was. But that's also scary, because that means it's actually quite intelligent. We were trying for hours to rationalize it, but none of us could really figure out why somebody would be out in the middle of the woods with no flashlight or backpack, stalking some random hikers in the middle of the night. None of us think that it was a human, but we also got no explanation. It's basically a campfire story for us at this point. We still go camping here and there, and I had some other weird stuff happen as well. But this is just about this specific case. But nowadays we stick to actual campsites, and we invite more friends than before. Backpacking alone is out of the question for me. English is not my first language, but I want to tell you about my encounter with the goat walker. I was camping in North Minnesota. It was early winter, which is tame in comparison to my home. I'm with my stepbrother, my stepfather, and Alaska. Alaska is an old dog that I've been having since I was just 5 years old. The day is normal. Alaska is quiet. My stepbrother is loud, and we go fishing. We start the fire and cook. At some point during this, I realize that we don't have any water. My stepfather tells me to go get some water, that there are some wells a mile or two down the trail. So my stepbrother, myself, and my dog Alaska are walking down the trail in the dark. We're far from any town, so the night is very dark, but the sky is looking really beautiful. So anyways, my stepbrother is spoiled. We're about 100 meters from the camp, and he starts saying that he's really tired. So I tell him to just go back. He takes the flashlight and storms off. From here, it's just me and Alaska, old friends from home. A few minutes as we continue walking, we start to hear this weird noise. We think it's an animal. It's not abnormal hearing animals in North Minnesota, obviously, but it seemed to be the wrong animal for these woods. It sounded like there was gravel scraping, and my dog is very nervous, which is pretty strange. My dog is strong-minded, so I get kind of worried too. He doesn't always act like this. as he starts to yip and snarl. Now I figure this must be a weird animal because the dog knows animals well and also knows their smells. We're also outdoors a lot, so this makes me a little bit more bothered. The rest of the walk is pretty silent, but Alaska keeps stopping and looking back down the trail. I begin to think that my stepbrother is playing tricks on us, but I'm too impatient to play around. So I finally get to the well, and I'm pumping the old lever, and it's making that creaking sound that they do. But then, in the woods I hear a sound like an injured animal. I'm very uneasy now. My dog is now hiding behind me, and this dog is normally super brave and likes to stand in front and guard me, but this time Alaska is too afraid. So I quickly fill up the jugs and I'm ready to go back. It's very hard to see in the dark because my stepbrother took the flashlight, so all I can use is the light from the sky. It's also very difficult to carry that many jugs of water with only so many hands. As I'm walking, Alaska begins to snarl and whine all over again. But this time, I can now see a figure on the trail ahead. It's not moving, it's just staring into the woods. It's obviously human, but I know Alaska would be eager to meet a stranger. It loves people, so I cough pretty loud so that the figure can hear. And that's when this person speaks. "Oh, you were passing by me earlier, and I didn't see or hear anyone." I stand there for a second, weary because again, I'm sure there was nobody on the trail. I can hear my dog breathing. Then, this weird sound comes from the man. I know this wasn't smart of me, but I decide to ask him where he's staying. And he says, "Oh, I have a tent. It's only a couple of sites from yours." I stand there again, not sure what to say. Then the water sloshes around in the jugs, and the man offers help to carry them. I actually agree, but as he starts walking over to me, there's another weird noise. And Alaska starts barking at this person when he comes over and takes the jug. He's really rough with it, and I also notice that he's all dirty. Like his hands look like he was digging in the mud or something. But I do say thank you, and he says, "Oh, not a problem," and that he's always eager to give help. My dog, on the other hand, is now standing on the other side of me, sniffing the air, and then I notice that it kind of smells like a farm. I don't want to be rude, so I don't ask questions. And I can actually see the campfire light through the trees, so I know we're not that far away. But as we're walking, there's a sudden feeling of anxiety that's overtaking me. I have this desire to tell the man that he doesn't have to come all the way back to camp, and I don't know why I'm having this issue. I never have any problems talking with my family, my boss, or girls, but I can't bring myself to look sideways at this man. But I have the feeling that something is insanely wrong with him. The fire was close enough now to throw a shadow, but I can't see anybody's face, and there's no talking. There's only sound from the fire. I still have this overwhelming fear. It's like the metal from the water, and then the farm smell. It's burning my nostrils. And then I realize that it reminds me of a time when my dad cut himself in the big barn. The smell of it all, and that much blood. I'm still afraid of blood, and I'm just very ill from that memory. That's when I finally turn to look at the man, and I see that his eyes are white all over. I'm taken aback as I yell, and then there's the animal sound again, and my dog barks. The man says, "Why are you screaming?" And he sounds actually afraid, and that's when I realize that he's actually blind. I confess and say that I don't think that he's actually blind, and he just gives this weird creepy laugh and says not to worry about it. And then I hear the animal sound again, but by now we're in full firelight, and it keeps looking like there's a weird animal just standing behind the man. It's like when you see those videos where there's a spirit that's attached to a person, and it looks like it's almost inside of them or something. And that's when I say, "What's that behind you?" And he says, "Oh, don't worry about that." And that's when I realize that there's something really weird going on. The man then laughs to break the silence, and he hands me the water jug. And that's when he says that he has to go and just doesn't say anything else. And he kind of hobbles off with this weird gait off into the woods. A few minutes later, my stepfather and my stepbrother come back from the trees as they had both gone to use the bathroom. That's the end of my story. I did the best that I could. I thought it was worth it. I know the English was very, very bad in it, and I most likely messed up on some words. So I tried to fix it the best I could to get the point across. So I hope you still enjoyed it. I'm not sure who this man was, or even if he was a man. Maybe he was the devil helping me out. Maybe. I'm not sure. But I know that image of his face still haunts me to this day. So this is not that scary or weird as some other stuff that you might see or hear. But it happened back around in 2010 when I went to Montana with my dad. I think I was about 13 or 14, around there. Anyways, this is some crazy stuff that happened to me. So we were in the middle of the Rocky Mountains in Montana, to be exact. I was with my dad on a trip cross country. We stopped in the national park for a few days. It was a random small town, so we park at this local super cool campground that has a lake nearby where I can go jump off the rocks and into the lake. I know it's gonna sound strange, and now that I think about it, it really was bad of my dad to do this. He would leave me here while he went to the bar. I mean, I was pretty mature, I want to say, at that age. But still, who leaves their son alone while they go get their fix, right? So while I'm swimming and playing around in the lake, this dude, I know, don't talk to strangers, but I mean, I wasn't a little kid no more. But there was this older guy. He looked Native American, and he looked to be about 60 or 70. And he walks up to me, and he just tells me that there are things in this area that belong to the Blackfoot tribe. Something about the guardians of these lands. He spoke of artifacts left behind by his ancestors, relics about legends. He then looked at me in the eyes, and in a stern tone, said, "Do not disturb these sacred objects. If you see them, don't pick them up, and do not touch them. There are beads on the ground that show the history, necklaces with the spirits of our ancestors, shoes that walk the roads that we now take, and drawings that capture the history of us. Each item is a thread of Blackfoot culture. Respect it and honor it." And that was it. He simply walked away. Yeah, very weird, I know. So my dad eventually came back, a bit drunk, but to be honest, that's when he was more friendly. So as the days went by, we went hiking a bit, and as we were walking, I came across some black stones that were sticking out of the ground a bit. I picked a few of them up because they looked very shiny and polished. I mean, where else do you see totally black meanie rocks? Pebbles almost, right? Anyways, yeah, I fucked up, but let me finish telling you what happened. We got back to the campground and went back inside the RV to sleep. Now at night is when the crazy shit started happening. As I was in bed, I heard this sound. It was like this crying that could be heard from the campground outside, but it didn't sound human whatsoever. It sounded like, I don't know, I can't even describe it. The kind of sounds that make the hair on your neck stand up. I'm not sure what to do, but I get even more scared when I hear footsteps walking up to the RV. I don't quite remember, but whoever is outside is breathing really heavy. It kind of sounds like a bear. Being curious and scared, I look out the window, but I don't see anything. But I know there's somebody outside because you can hear them walking. I can hear them breathing, but there's nothing out there. I end up going back to bed and eventually fall asleep. But the next morning when I wake up, we find out that a fisherman has been found dead around the lake, which is the exact lake we were staying at. I have no idea how he died, but I remember the noises from last night, and I couldn't help but put two and two together. My dad then drove into town outside of this park. We were getting ready to head through the Midwest, and we ended up stopping at this Native American museum. As we walk inside, I noticed it was run by this really old woman. We explored around a bit, and my dad told me to keep my hands inside my pockets at all times. At some point, my dad walks up to the counter to purchase some souvenirs. As I'm looking around, I take my hands out of my pockets, and one of the black rocks I collected while hiking drops out. This woman sees this, and I kid you not, she completely loses her mind. She tells me that I should never pick those up again, and that I don't know what I'm doing, that I have brought a curse upon myself. So me and my dad just look at her crazy, and we're both a little freaked out. So we just kind of walk out. By this point, we're thinking that the whole town is just full of weird people, as my dad continues driving further out. Later on that evening, we stop at a diner. As we walk in, that's when I notice him. That same native man that had talked to me at the lake. He was just standing in the corner of the diner, just staring, creepy as hell. At some point between us walking in and getting our meal, he disappears. Now there was no back door to this diner, and he was gonna have to walk by us in order for him to get out. I don't know if it's related to all the creepy shit that's going on, but later on that night, when we're sleeping in the RV again, I don't hear anything no more, as we're pretty much further out from the national park and that creepy ass town. I noticed and remember that I start having these weird dreams that I can't comprehend. But I know it's about a woman that is yelling at me, telling me that I shouldn't have disturbed them. I wake up, and mind you, we're so far away from the park now. I know we're like hours basically, but that's when I hear them again. Those crying sounds, they're back. This time, when I hear those terrible noises outside, the footsteps and the heavy breathing, I look outside the window, and I see this thing, just staring at me. I can only describe it as everything demonic. Everything about it was just wrong and just felt very evil. I closed the blinds and I lay there sleepless from that night on. I would have gone to wake up my father, but I know he would have told me to stop being a little wuss and go back to bed. I didn't sleep at all that night. As I'm laying there in bed underneath my covers, trying to ignore all the sounds outside, I start hearing taps on my window. I'm not sure what else happened, as I know I eventually fell asleep. But the next morning, we finally get out of Montana, and that's when I noticed that the dreams finally stopped. No sounds, no dreams, no more weird people, nothing. However, recently, I went back to Montana with my uncle about a year ago, and I kid you not, the exact same thing starts up again every night. The crying, the wailing, the sounds. I didn't see anything this time though, but still, the same dreams about this woman yelling at me. I did try to go back to the museum to find the lady I saw the first time around, but apparently, she was dead. Now, I have no idea where the guy was. The guy that gave me the warning at the lake. Even after I went to the diner, he wasn't there. So I ended up talking to one of the workers at the diner, and when I asked him about that guy, his eyes grew wide and said, "Those who see him means that they, who shall not be named, are near." Creepy as fuck, right? Well, to follow up, he said that I need to leave Montana and get a full cleansing, and to never pick up anything from the woods again. We did leave Montana, and everything stopped again. I never did go get that cleansing, but I would advise, if you go hiking, camping, backpacking, or whatever in the woods, never touch or pick anything you find. We had a tradition of going to see my grandfather every summer and spend some time at his cabin. the cabin by a lake, and older than he is. The cabin is a load of fun for a child spending their carefree summer. The one thing I disliked about the cabin was there was no indoor washroom. A shower was set up outside. An outhouse a few steps off into the woods was the worst thing about the cabin. I hated using that thing. Bugs always took over the inside, and I had a fear of something reaching up to grab me if I sat down. We begged my grandfather to get indoor plumbing. He only got a tub hooked up, but his water heater can only handle so much, so we were banned from using it in the summer. The place was just barely held together. It would be cheaper to buy a new cabin than to renovate it, but we still went every year, always forgetting the negatives, until we finally arrived. Even my father complained about the outhouse, and he never really complained about anything. My grandfather also had a rack of hunting rifles and one shotgun. He told all of us to never touch them, and to respect the weapons. He left the cabinet they were inside locked, his guns unloaded, and the ammo hidden somewhere in the cabin. He took no chances with the guns around a bunch of kids. He always said he would whoop some ass if he ever saw us touching them, and told us it was because he loved us and didn't want an accident to happen. I asked why he kept the guns. I didn't see him using them very often aside from shooting a deer or two. I would see him go off into the woods while we swam with a rifle on his shoulder, but he normally never came back with some animal he shot. I don't think he would kill something to waste, leaving it behind. Or did I think he was a bad shot? He may walk slowly, but his eyesight was better than ours. He always knew what might be going on. One time, my cousin found a cigarette someone dropped near the corner store, where we sometimes got ice cream snacks. He kept it hidden for a day. When he thought that the coast was clear, he used one of the lighters for the fire pit. He didn't even take a drag before our grandfather came out yelling at him, scaring us all to death. With 3 kids crying, begging him not to tell our parents, he gave us mercy. As long as we cleaned the boat we've been putting off all weekend. Overall, my grandfather was a scary man. One night, after telling each other ghost stories to freak each other out, the worst thing happened. When everyone else was dead asleep, I needed to use the restroom. I hated going out at night. It might be only a few steps, and yet it felt like a mile walk. Things croaked off in the woods, which were perfectly normal noises for a forest. When you're a kid, full of ghost stories and listening to these things, those noises turned into killers and ghosts waiting to scoop you up. I went through the cabin to the back door, knowing that I couldn't hold it until morning. There was a flashlight by the door. I turned it on only to have it flicker off. It was the kid's job to make sure the flashlight had new batteries. Sometimes we switched them to out the good ones in the shared Game Boy for a few more hours of playtime. It finally came back to bite us. However, since the full moon was out, I had taken the path 100 times before, so I went on without the flashlight. I feared what my grandfather would do if I woke him up, trying to find new batteries. Slipping on my shoes, I went off in the backyard and down the short path to use the washroom. I heard a noise, and I looked over my shoulder and walked faster, fearing what might be looking at me in the dark. That was a mistake. Going without a flashlight and not paying attention to where I was going could have killed me that night. The longer I walked, the more afraid I was. It should not take this long to get to the outhouse. Another crack of a twig made me jump. I could no longer hold it and needed to step off the path to do my business and carry on. I hated going to the washroom out in the woods. At least it was quick, and I was back on the path towards the cabin. But was I? Nothing looked right. The trail appeared too overgrown. I didn't understand how I had gone so far off the path. In my mind, I went the right way the entire time, and I only got lost when I stepped aside. Fear nearly froze me to the spot, forcing my body to move. I started going down where I thought I had came from, praying to find the path again. At this point, I called out for someone to come and get me. A sound came, and I shut my mouth, heart beating so fast that it hurt. I looked around trying to see what was stalking a poor scared kid in the dark. Something flew at me. Wings flapping and a screeching cry made me snap. That's when I ran, screaming, trying to get away from whatever this thing was. Only when I stopped running and was very lost, I realized I just got scared by a bat. Just a normal, harmless bat. I wanted to cry. Unless someone noticed I wasn't in my sleeping bag when they woke up to go to the bathroom as well. No one would know I was missing until morning. How long would it take until someone did notice? I skipped breakfast pretty often. They might even assume I was just sleeping in. I didn't want to stay out in the woods overnight. Having no other options or ideas of what to do while lost, I kept walking while trying to force back my tears. I had forgot it was best to stay in one spot while being lost in the woods. Just going deeper in them wasn't the best idea. I felt cold, scared, and was getting bit by bugs. My heart almost broke over the idea of being out there forever, starving to death, and no one ever knowing what happened. Thinking back to the books I needed to read in school, I wonder if I could live out in the woods until they found me. If I find clean water and could figure out how to make a fire, I might be able to. The issue being, I never actually started a fire without a lighter. I tried with sticks, but it always took too long, and we always gave up. Me and my cousins loved burning things and were impatient. There was always a lighter to use. I wanted to try and find the cabin until the sun rose. If I still was in the woods by tomorrow night, I would buckle down to figure out how to make fire. Wait, wouldn't someone smell the smoke and find me sooner? Or would I burn the entire forest down? Getting motivated, I started to look for a clearing that I could use for a fire pit. It took a while, but I found a spot where the ground looked to be mostly dirt. It took longer to find a stone I could use to start digging out a hole in the dirt for my fire pit. My hands cold and the rock cut into my fingers a few times. Then, I needed to find the right sticks to get the fire started. And then finally, get enough wood to keep it going if I did get one started. I didn't go out of sight of the clearing, as I collected what I needed. Exhausted by the time I thought I was ready, my pit was filled with dry leaves and small sticks. I sat down ready to try to get a fire started. I used 2 sticks I peeled the bark off at first. My hands became raw from rubbing them together. Frustrated, I didn't think I could get them warm enough from the friction to get anything started. I then tried a rock method. I didn't know if any rocks would do, or if my grandfather had a special type in his fire starting kit. A miracle of the night happened when I found the right rocks to smash together. One spark caught and I nearly fainted when the leaves burned and yet didn't catch fire. I kept trying until I had a very small flame that I actually fed with my breath. I've never been so proud of myself in my entire life. The smoke blew into my face, causing me to cough and eyes water. Still very happy for my very small fire though. There wasn't a way to tell how long I was out there for. The sun hadn't even risen yet, so at least a few hours. As I warmed myself by the flames, I heard something off in the distance of the woods. I heard it again. My chest got tight with hope when I recognized that the noises I was hearing were human voices. No one I knew, but still someone out here in the woods with me. With my fire still going, I would be able to see my way back to the clearing if needed. I hurried off towards the voices, so happy I couldn't speak.
Mine.
The voices were a warning for the person they were speaking with. It sounded strange, as if English wasn't their first language. Still, it was someone who could help. At least, that's what I thought. Rushing into another clearing, all my excitement faded when I saw what belonged to those voices. A dead, torn to pieces deer sat in the middle of the small clearing, blood soaking the grass and leaves. In the clear moonlight, I saw 3 pale things, figures, all hunched over in the deer, tearing in with their hands and teeth. All their limbs were skinny and far too long for their bodies. Each of them were pushing aside each other, trying to eat as much of the deer as they could. Skin pale and drawn tight against their bones, faces covered with blood, each of them bald, with a mouth far too large for their face. And their eyes, oh God, their eyes were missing. Each of them had black empty sockets. None of them noticed me. That is, until I let out a scream. All 3 heads darted up. Now knowing there was some fresh prey, I turned to run. Sounds from behind me said they were all starting to chase me. Tears came to my eyes, making it nearly impossible to see where I was going. I slammed into a tree hard enough to hit my arm to the point I thought it was broken. I tumbled to the ground, crying in pain. My moment of weakness enough for one creature to get on top, limbs on either side. The head looking around trying to hear where I was. The large mouth opening, dripping blood on my tear-stained face. The moment before the mouth filled with teeth tore my face off, a loud cracking sound echoed through the forest. The creature blown off. I screamed even more when a powerful hand grabbed my shoulder to drag me to my feet. Grandpa. I choked up when I saw him clearly through my wet eyes. He was holding a shotgun, ready to fire again. His face stern, not afraid or surprised of the creatures. I expected them to attack us. They somehow knew what the gun could do. Grabbing their dead, they dragged it deeper into the darkness. The moment they were out of sight, I heard the worst noise. Awful sounds of bones cracking and breaking. They were eating the one my grandfather had shot. It was all too much for me. I broke down crying, my grandfather silently bending over to pick me up in one arm. As he carried me through the woods, he stomped out my small fire on the way out. He didn't scold me for crying or getting lost. Him actually comforting me that night was the kindest moment we ever shared together. We arrived back by the time the sun was rising. My mother and father awake and worried out of their mind. They scooped me up when we arrived, and I cried all over again. Before we left, I was able to get my grandfather alone to ask him what happened. Those things wouldn't bother us at the cabin. I only saw them because I went too far in the woods. Apparently, he had a deal with them, that they were not to touch any humans as long as he fed them, and he also wasn't sure how many of them lived in the woods, or even what they were. He also said that he fully understood if I didn't want to come back to the cabin next year. I almost didn't, until he passed away of natural causes. I spent parts of my summer at the cabin. He wasn't able to get an indoor toilet, but he did mark the path to the outhouse with those solar charged lamps that people use in their garden to make sure that no one ever goes off the path again. I recently moved into a new apartment with my dog, Marbles. It's not a nice place by any means. However, it's the only option I had. I'm just now starting a new job, and I barely have enough money to cover rent, ramen, dog food, and of course, Netflix. So I moved to this small dirt cheap apartment on the outskirts of town because it's cheap and also because it's pet friendly. No, it's not the best thing, but it's only temporary. The apartment is small with only 3 rooms. The first room you enter is the kitchen living room with a hallway in the back. The door at the end of the hall leads to the bathroom, and the hallway is the door on the right side to the bedroom. I don't have anything or personal belongings, so the apartment is very bare. I never even bothered to decorate the place because I wasn't planning on staying here long. We've been in the apartment for a few weeks, and everything seems fine. As we got comfy, Marbles took a liking to the couch in the living room. It wasn't a couch that belonged to me. It actually came with the apartment. Well, Marbles started sleeping on the couch at night. With that said, Marbles likes to get up and move around in the middle of the night. She would get up and come to the bedroom door and hope to get inside. I always sleep with the door closed, so she would stay to whine and paw at the door. Marbles had long nails that she hated getting cut, so you could hear her walking throughout the apartment if you were awake. After a few nights of this, I just started leaving the door open for her. From then on, she would come and get in the bed with me at all times of the night. This never bothered me. Many more weeks went by with nothing happening. However, one weekend, my Netflix session lasted a little bit longer than it normally does, and I was still up at around 2 a.m. in the morning. I was just wrapping up Stranger Things Season 2 when out of the corner of my eye, I saw it in the doorway to the hall. There was something peeking at me. I turned to look directly at it. It looked like the top half of a face, peeking from the left side of the doorway. The only thing I could see were two eyes, beady and black, staring at me. I was frozen, not sure if it was fear or shock stopping me from moving. I blinked, and it was still there. After a few more seconds, I started panicking and yelled out, "Who the fuck are you? Get out!" For a few more seconds, it kept staring, and then slowly began to pull away and out of view. Once I could no longer see it, it took a few moments to regain control of my body. Once I had, I jumped up and slammed the door, locking it. Marbles, who had been laying on the bed with me, was now sitting up and alert. I called the police and told them someone had broken into my apartment. After a while, I heard them knocking on the front door. Eventually, I mustered the courage to step out from the room and run to the front door. They investigated, and the landlord was called. No one was found in the apartment, and when the police had arrived, the front door was still locked from when I got home. There were no signs of breaking and entering, but I insisted that I saw someone. The police did one more sweep of the apartment before leaving, telling me that there was nothing more they could do. The landlord, to whom I must give credit, swapped out the locks the next day, giving me all new keys. He told me that it was possible that a previous renter still had a set of keys to the room and had possibly come in. The thought of that unnerved me, but the more I thought back on it, the less human the thing seemed to be. It took a few weeks and many sleepless nights to go back to normal, if you could call it that. I told myself that I could handle the stress, that we would only be here a little bit longer. During that time, I also bought a baseball bat, which I now kept beside my bed. Now, I still kept the door to the bedroom open at night, but only slightly open, so that Marbles could slip in or out. I didn't feel comfortable seeing the doorway where that thing had been, but one night, Marbles came in and hopped in the bed like she normally does. She settled down and rested her head on my thigh, which is very common. I had been asleep and never bothered to open my eyes. I started drifting back off to sleep when I heard a sound. It was the sound of the nails of Marble as she walked. It came from the living room and was approaching the bedroom door. I was facing the side of the room with the door, and I opened my eyes, and Marbles was there, pushing the door open and coming in. A chill ran up my spine. Slowly, I looked over and down at the bed. It was there. The thing was resting its head on my thigh, looking right into my eyes. For a quick second, I got a look at it. It had a humanoid form, but it was impossibly inhuman. Its face was horrific, with those beady black eyes, long greasy black hair. Its body was elongated, and it looked as though it was made up of only bones with skin wrapped tightly around them. Its face then started to creep closer to mine, and I was finally able to move. I threw the blanket over the thing and jumped out of the bed, running to the front door. I could hear it scurrying behind me, along with Marbles running behind. When I got to the door, I turned to see both Marbles and this thing following. Marbles made it to the door first, and once she was out, I slammed the door shut. I heard and felt the thing slam against the door, scratching and banging against it. I could also hear its raspy breathing. Eventually, it all went quiet. My phone was still inside, but after a while, one of the neighbors opened the door after my crazy knocking. They phoned the police for me. The police weren't as friendly this time, but I told them that I had trapped the person inside my apartment. After a long search of the entire apartment, the police found nothing. I couldn't believe it. They scolded me and told me that if I called for this again, I would be arrested. I felt like I was going insane, refusing to go back in alone. The landlord actually joined me while I packed up all my belongings. I wasn't staying there any longer. My parents had an extra room they offered me, and it was going to take a long time before I felt comfortable being alone again. I'm typing this all out from my parents' house, laying in the guest room. Well, a few paragraphs ago, I noticed something. Over in the corner is a closet with folding doors. It's slightly open, and in the crack of the doors, I can see two beady black eyes staring right at me. The nighttime brought two rules we had to live by. No matter what family you come from, you are to not look outside or be outside. This one night brought my brother to sneak out to meet a girl who lived nearby. Teenage stuff, if you get what I'm saying. Anyways, the later hours of the night, and he's sneaking back through his window. As he's getting ready to pull himself in from the absolute darkness of the night, he heard my dog growling a few feet behind him. The dog we had at the time was from a known, highly aggressive breed, but to hear him growling came as a surprise to my brother. He claimed to call out soft to the dog, but the dog was unresponsive. After a few seconds, my brother slowly began walking towards the dog. And as he got closer, the smallest glint of light hit my dog's face. As his face softly lit, my brother realized that the dog was not looking at him, but the area of the roof right above his bedroom window. As he slowly turned and looked at the empty space, he began to recognize that heart-sinking feeling of somebody or something watching him, along with the sounds like if something was sitting, perched on the edge of the roof. The more time went by, the more dread he felt. He was so scared that he rushed through his window and to our mother, panicking and telling her what he did and what was going on. She was so scared she wasn't even bothered by the fact he snuck out. I remember watching and listening from my bedroom door and seeing her turn pale and begin to shake. She told him to never do it again and to keep his window closed. It was from that day on that not only our neighbors, but people from the complete opposite side of the community began to open up about their experiences with the thing that walks among us at night on the roofs of the house. One of which includes a close relative who was home alone with an aunt. One night, she claimed to begin hearing something clawing and walking on the roof. When she noticed it, she said it was like it noticed her or knew she was there, because when she tried to find a room to shield herself in, the footsteps followed right above. Think of your ceiling made out of glass, and this thing, always knowing exactly where your foot is falling, and the exact moment you extend your foot, there is another step. It wasn't until I reached my 20s that I began experiencing this creature on a weekly, yes, I said weekly, and I am not exaggerating. It was like clockwork, especially once snow began falling. Heavy footsteps before the sun was up that woke me up around 5 a.m. at least once a week. Here and there those footsteps would be substituted for what I only imagine is a grown man in steel-toed boots running with what sounded like chains dragging. I was so desperate for sleep and to not be bothered that I started putting holy water on my ceiling, but it seemed to only hold off whatever this being was for a few days before coming back again. As time went by, not only did my neighbor, but the residents who lived several houses away would tell my family about their experiences with the thing that lurked on top of our houses. One neighbor was simply sitting in the living room when he began to hear like somebody was walking above him. He said it left him paralyzed with fear, and all he could do was sit and stare in horror at the area above him. Another friend who lived 3 houses down was taking out her garbage when she heard walking right above her doorway, and left her so scared she ran inside and refused to be out at night for months. I can go on and on about the stories that left our friends, family, and neighbors shaken to the core for hours, but for now, this seems to be the most nightmarish creatures our people have continuously shared the space with since we were forced into colonization. Even though these stories and these experiences can spark a lot of interest in seeking out these beings, I simply ask that no one actually take the time to. You never know what might follow you and make your home its home as well. Maybe those noises you hear in your attic at night when you're going to sleep are actually coming from your roof, and maybe it's something that has followed you already because of these stories and these experiences that you dig into. If you think you have one of these things making your home their home, I would recommend to call a priest or a medicine man, somebody who's familiar with these things, because if not, next time it might be outside your window. Let me start off by saying my husband is native, and this happened about 6 years before I met him. My ex-husband was stationed in San Diego, and I flew out there to visit him. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to stay with him on the base for whatever reason. Don't ask me because I don't even know myself. Also, I should add I had just given birth about 3 months before this, and I had my son with me. I found a hotel that wasn't far from the base and close to food and whatnot. I went out to get some food and then walked back to the hotel since it wasn't far. Unfortunately, with my horrible sense of direction, I got lost and ended up near a wooded area. But there was a highway also nearby. It was getting close to sunset, and I started seeing sets of shining eyes, and I thought they were just coyotes. I'm not afraid so much. After about 20 minutes, one set of shining eyes got closer, and I saw it was a coyote. I remember watching Steve Irwin as a teenager, and remember that if you make yourself appear bigger and more loud than you actually are, they will most of the time run off. So I started clapping my hands and shouting. This one, however, didn't. It actually stood up and started walking like a person. I have never run away from something so fast. It never followed me, and I wasn't going to stick around to find out what it was. It wasn't until I met my current husband that I found out what it was, and the look on his face when I told him this story, he actually went pale. He never said anything. He just kind of nodded like he understood. Maybe it knew I was still semi-healing from having recently given birth, or it saw my son in the stroller I was pushing and just wanted to scare me. Either way, I don't know. I just know that it succeeded in scaring me. This isn't really a question. It's more or less me telling the story of how I saw a skinwalker, and I didn't even know what it was at the time. I love camping, but after my most recent trip, I don't think it will ever be the same. I set up my tent on nice, flat ground and collected some wood for a fire. The night came with all its nightly sounds, and I relaxed at the owls and chirping crickets. Even better was the fact that no one else was around. Hell, it was subtle. I almost missed it. The voice came from deep within the woods, and for a moment, I didn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded almost like a female, but strange enough, I just couldn't tell. Please help. It continued. I shined my flashlight between the bushes and walked around. To be completely honest, even as a grown man, I was paralyzed with fear. So, I did the responsible thing and called the local police. That's when things went from being odd to very, very weird. The police actually told me to ignore it. I explained to them that someone could be injured and maybe needed medical attention, but they assured me otherwise. When I kept pushing and asked why, they told me, "Sir, if you ever hear that voice again, ignore it, do not respond, and do not approach." Well, I did hear it again, but I didn't ignore it. It was almost midnight when I heard the voice a second time. I awoke to someone whispering, "Help," and it sounded like she was just outside my tent. I went outside to check and no one was there, but the voice continued from a distance. "Help, please." Again, I grabbed my flashlight and looked around the area I was camping. I was too afraid to follow the voice into the woods, especially since the authorities themselves avoided it. But I struggled morally, trying to decide whether I should go and help this person or listen to the police, who were concerned for my safety. But then, I heard another, different voice. This other voice, which also seemed to be coming from the woods, was an octave lower. Unlike the first one, which cried for help, this one was loud and demanding.
"Quiet.
The other voice demanded.
No one's going to help you."
Once I heard that, I was pretty sure someone was in trouble, so I called the police again. When I informed them about a second voice coming from the woods, they seemed even more concerned. They told me that I should pack up my things and leave the campsite immediately. They said that hearing the second, more manly voice meant that it was getting desperate. They also said that the two voices were coming from the same person. That part was bizarre and confused me, to say the least. It was at this point I dismissed the police in that area as crazy, but not before telling them off. I got angry. I told them that if they didn't get down here to come and check it out, then I would do it myself. I said that a woman could be in serious trouble and that it was their job to help her, but they still refused to come. All they kept repeating to me over the phone was, "Do not enter the woods, sir." They actually seemed more afraid than I was. Once I hung up the phone, I heard the voices again. A gentle, "Please, somebody help me." And then, a growling,
"Quiet. No one's coming."
It was a little past midnight at that point. I couldn't live with myself knowing that I had the chance to save someone's life, but instead became a coward. So I grabbed some things and ventured into the woods. When I entered the woods, the voices ceased. just like that. No cries, no whispers, and no commands. Even the owls and crickets went away. Nothing but dancing leaves and creaking tree branches. I stopped walking and looked around, a full 360 degrees. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out. Nothing. "I'm here to help," I continued. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Still, nothing. I thought of calling the police again, then chuckled to myself. I found it strange, but somewhat comforting that I didn't find anyone out there. Regardless, I was still creeped out, so I packed my things and finally left the campsite. I didn't know why the police, of all people, were so afraid. Worst case, someone was in actual danger, and we all failed them. To be honest though, when I heard the voice the very first time, I did think it was a joke. When I heard it the second time, along with that other voice, I became a bit more concerned. And same with the third time I heard it in the woods. However, when I heard it again, for the fourth time, a week after I left the campsite, coming from inside my own house, I became very, very concerned. Upon a recent discussion with an alumnus from a previous supply caravan to Black Mesa on the Navajo REZ, it has come to my attention that one of the gals who accompanied the caravan a couple years ago had a very curious experience. I was able to get her contact info. Let's call her Amanda, and we'll interview her about her encounter. In an effort to be respectful of the culture and the taboo nature of the subject matter, we decided to change the names and category of whatever this is that she experienced down there. Just a bit of background, there is a company called Peabody Coal Mining, which leases tracts of land in and around Black Mesa, and the landscape is one of shadow topographical relief marked by dry draws and arroyos, which are essentially dry creek beds that flood during periods of heavy rain, which, granted, is not a very common occurrence in the high deserts of Arizona. This is what Amanda said. I was trying to retrieve a lamb who had escaped from the enclosure one afternoon. When I turned around, I couldn't seem to retrace my steps back to, quote-unquote, Johnny's compound, where his parents' hogan is located. I was following one of the arroyos, hoping it would lead me to a road. That's when I started having asthma. I think that I started hyperventilating and had a full-blown panic attack because I lost consciousness, and when I came to it, it was nighttime. I stood up and looked around. I heard something like a twig snapping behind me and turned around to look. In the pale moonlight, I thought I saw something ducked behind a tree. It looked like the dark shape of a person who had been peering around the tree, but then withdrew when I noticed it. But I could tell that it was still there. So I called out, "Hello?" Silence. "Hello? Is someone there? I'm with the Colorado caravan. I think I'm lost." I laughed nervously. "Can you help me?" After a moment or so, this figure peered back around the tree. Only this time, it looked like my friend Charlie from the caravan. The figure then stepped out from behind the tree and motioned me to follow, thinking that Charlie had been sent to bring me back to camp, and still feeling a bit confused. I started to follow the figure back up the draw. We've been walking for maybe 5 to 10 minutes when another figure seemingly materialized from the shadows out in front of us. I felt a bolt of pain, like a severe migraine, and had to stop. When I looked up, there were 3 more figures, and they were standing in a semicircle. before me. Now these things did not look human at all, but rather like large coyotes, and I could see 10 eyes looking back at me in the dim silvery light. I started to stumble back, but the coyotes made no move to follow as I turned to run away. I ran for maybe 5 minutes before I stopped to catch my breath. That's when I heard another twig snap and looked back to see one of the coyote-shaped silhouette up on the ridgeline from back towards the direction from which I had ran. To my horror, the coyote appeared to stand up on its hind legs and let out a bone, chill and scream. I heard other people describe this before, but it almost sounded like a coyote howl, magnified through a megaphone, and then distorted with a heavy reverb-like sound effect. My head was pounding, but I truly felt in fear for my life, so I kept running. Eventually, I came to a service road and was able to flag down a Peabody mine worker who was driving down the road in a work vehicle. I convinced him to give me a ride and told him our caravan leader, Buck, could explain the situation to his manager if need be. As I climbed into the cab and we started driving, I looked in the rear view mirror and saw those eyes reflecting the red brake lights from the back of the truck. I don't think they followed us, but I couldn't be sure. So when the mine worker dropped me off at the compound, I ran into Johnny's parents' hogan, which is a big no-no for non-natives, but I didn't know where else to go, and I was still very scared. Johnny's parents only spoke Diné, but I was finally able to express the gist of what happened in between broken sobs and sniffling. I saw Johnny's father's face go pale as he realized what I was trying to say. He quickly shushed me and went to look out the window. Johnny's mom went to the stove and collected a small pan of ashes. She then dumped out on the table and started dipping bullets into them, loading them into a .357. She was singing what I can only assume was a Diné prayer for protection and looking worried at me. They let me sleep inside and nothing more happened that night. In the morning they called the medicine man to come and pray over me. We still had a couple nights left but decided to call the trip short after that. Johnny said not to worry, that the walkers wouldn't bother them anymore now that we were leaving, and that he was just glad that I was okay. Suffice to say, I won't be going on any more caravans anytime soon. I know everyone says not to go searching for these things, these skinwalkers. Well, I can't tell you how much I regret not heeding that advice. Now, I spent a considerable amount of time on the Navajo REZ in the past, so I thought I knew what I was doing. It's actually not that hard to find a skinwalker if you know what you're looking for, and if you do certain things, they'll come to you, as long as you're in one of the active areas. Such areas are in the path of the skinwalker, as it were, where a local clan of skinwalkers will come together to hold council and carry out their various rites and rituals and plan their evil doings. Kayenta, Arizona, is a town on the Navajo Nation at the intersection of Highway 160 and Highway 163. There's a pizza place there called Pizza Edge. Nearby is a car wash and a gas station, as well as a couple other little fast food restaurants. The whole area is just dirt, except for the mentioned highways, which are paved. Anyways, I mention this because that's about all there is to Kayenta. That plus a high school and a couple small hotels, a church, a post office, and a grocery store. The houses consist mainly of Navajo-style hogans and double-wide trailers. It all started in that small downtown area next to the Pizza Edge. As soon as I pulled into the small dirt parking lot, I noticed a Navajo man and a dog sitting in the shade. The man appeared to be asleep, but the dog was looking right at me, only its eyes were strange, vaguely human somehow. It was starting to get dark, so I went in to grab a slice of cheese pizza. When I returned, the dog was next to my car, standing on two legs and trying to get in my open windows. I shouted at the dog, and it dropped back to all fours and scampered off. I didn't see the man anywhere, so I got in my car and drove out of town a couple of miles to find a place to park for the night. I had a garbage bag with which I collected some roadkill along the way. I had found a dead coyote, a couple skunks, a raccoon, and a fox. I placed the dead animals out in a field where two natural draws met to form an open space next to a small pond. I had a hot cup of coffee, and I was ready to stay up all night if need be. At some point, however, I did fall asleep and woke with a start when I realized it was the middle of the night and someone or something was walking around my car. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it out the window. Boy, do I wish I hadn't done that. There was that dog again, except it was walking on two legs, peering in at me. I froze up. I couldn't move a muscle. The dog was breathing on the window, causing it to fog up in the light. Its eyes just looked wrong, like a human's eyes in the face of a dog. I jumped into the driver's seat and tried to start the car, but the engine wouldn't turn over. That thing was trying to open the door, and I could hear it scratching its claws along the side of my car. Finally, the engine turned over, and I was able to start the car. I hit the gas and sped out of there like a bat out of hell. I could see that dog thing in my rear view mirror, still running on two legs, before dropping back down onto all four legs and veering off into the night. I don't know what I was thinking, but that experience really scared me. Don't go looking for these things. They're out there, and they might just have you for dinner. When I was 23, I had a security gig at a dairy farm in Ohio. It was a modest place, only holding a few dozen cows at any given time. My then co-worker, a 34-year-old recovering meth addict named Corey, had just been fired for letting a cow go missing on his watch. An offense that would get you fired in every sense of the word. For starters, Corey was insane. By the time we met, he was seriously addicted to all kinds of drugs, and it rendered him virtually schizophrenic. Long nights were spent with him during my training period. He would tell me about the CIA and how they were out to get him. He was convinced that they were broadcasting thoughts into his head, and that they would stop at nothing to ruin his life. More than once, I would catch him glancing over his shoulder or peeking out of windows with a dumb look on his face, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was following him. That's the type of person that Corey was. Each of our cows had an ear tag labeled with a number. At 8 p.m., they were each to be guided into their own respective stalls and locked in for the night. Padlocks became the norm after an incident with local kids a few years earlier. In the mornings, we would have to carry around a clipboard containing each lock combination and individually release each one. It was the most annoying way to start the day, but the cows were more secure that way. That's what made Corey's story so unbelievable. He had claimed that the previous night, cow number 29 had been locked away in her stall along with the others. He told us that the only thing out of the ordinary that night was a bat stuck in the rafters that he planned to deal with in the morning. In order for his claim to be true, an intruder would have unlocked the barn with a set of keys, unlocked 29's stall with the correct combination, then reset the locks and leave undetected. Either that, or they picked up a 1,600-pound animal and leaped through a window. Considering Corey's nasty habit of abandoning his duties in order to twitch and hallucinate in the corner, a small part of me believed that some two-bit thief might have been able to get one over him. My boss, however, a 50-year-old hothead, concluded that Corey must have been involved with the cow's disappearance and kicked him to the curb. With nobody else to fill his position, my boss had offered to pay me extra for each of his duties that I could complete until we received a new hire. Naturally, I agreed. I would be heading back to school in a few weeks and needed all the money I could get. My first night back at work began normally. Since I would now be doing the work of 2 security guards, I would arrive early to get a head start on Corey's checklist. I started out by sweeping out the barn. Farmhands try to keep the TMR in a long pile just in front of the stall door so the cows could eat throughout the night, but that shit practically painted the floor by the time I got there. Midway through, I noticed something reflective in the corner of the barn. I swept a loose bit of corn and hay over it to investigate. On the floor before me was a neon yellow ear tag, and I picked it up to examine it. 29. Next to 29's ear tag were the skeletal remains of a bat. I guess that was just another thing that Corey never got around to dealing with. I swept up the bones along with the rest of the barn. By the time I finished, it was already 8 p.m. I made my way out to the fields, and one at a time, I guided each cow to its assigned stall. I got through about 10 or so before I noticed something strange. Across the field, about 50 meters away from everything else and all the others, was a cow, alone. It faced away from me, seemingly transfixed on a nearby cornfield. Seeing a cow on its own is nothing strange, as they sometimes need personal space the same way as people do. What was strange, though, was the way that her tail stuck straight out from behind her, unwavering. She stood as if she were afraid to slip, with her feet planted far apart. Perhaps the strangest of all, her head appeared to be tilted at a 90-degree angle. I wasn't eager to tell my boss. They had already put down so many sick cows before, but losing 2 in the matter of a week might have been enough to send them over the edge. That's when I decided to save that cow for last, as I continued to guide the rest of them inside for the night. Being in charge of twice the amount of cows I was used to was time-consuming. It took me nearly an hour to round them up. By the time I locked number 36 for the night, it was 9 o'clock. I should have been making my rounds by then, especially given the circumstances. I just had that last cow to deal with. When contemplating how long it was going to take me to unlock each cow in the morning, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The only stall left empty was number 29. I shuffled to the field, and surely enough, she was there. She hadn't moved an inch since I started the process of moving them. I approached her slowly. It was surreal seeing a creature frozen in such an odd position. As I came up on her, I could hear a definite, but muffled, chittering. It was unlike any noise I had ever heard from a cow. What the fuck did you eat? I thought to myself. I whistled to the cow before approaching her to avoid scaring her. On a dime, the chittering ceased. The cow's left ear rose to face the sky and began to oscillate like the periscope of a submarine. I could tell that moving this one would be a challenge. I rubbed her back, attempting to calm her down. Bonding is key when establishing any sort of relationship with an animal. I had never interacted with 29 before, so we were unfamiliar with each other. Her skin felt bizarre, like clay with hide draped over it. I walked around to see her face. Her eyes were peeled open, darting around. Her mouth hung open and drooped to the side. I examined her left ear, searching for a place to reinsert her tag, but there was no piercing. I strapped the halter to 29's mouth and began to lead her. It was like trying to uproot a tree with a bike chain. Each tug that I gave was useless. I began to put my weight into it, but still, no luck. When I say no luck, I don't mean that 29 wouldn't follow me. I mean that her body shows zero sign of being affected by my body weight whatsoever. Cows are strong creatures, but they're not made of stone. I was perplexed. After 15 minutes of this, I decided that it was useless to continue on, with the clock ever ticking. I could no longer afford to neglect my rounds. I began to walk to the security post to collect my flashlight and get on with the night. I heard a slow trotting. I looked behind me to see that the cow had in fact moved. 29 was now facing me, not so shy now, I wondered. I turned around and continued walking towards the gate. When I made it halfway through the field, I began to hear the trotting again. But this time, it was louder and much quicker. I smiled to myself. Wish I would have known to walk away sooner. Without turning to face the cow, I walked into the barn and began fumbling with 29's padlock. 3 left, 32 right, 23 left. As the lock clicked open, I heard the floorboards behind me creak. A slow, vocal noise turned to a sickly gurgle. I hope to God whatever you got isn't contagious, I said before spinning around. All color drained from my face as I was greeted with the sight of the 8-foot-tall beast standing before me. On its hind legs, its ears were flapping like a hummingbird's wings. Its head was cocked sideways with one eye focused on me. Its pupils seemed to grow and shrink as it scanned over my entire body. Its lower jaw slowly moved up and down as it began to vocalize again. It began to creep towards me. Its front legs were kicking as it attempted to keep balance, all the while making that same noise. I began to feel lightheaded. I grabbed 29's padlock and made a break for the door. That's when the cow began to stomp behind me. I began to hyperventilate as I sprinted. The rest of the cows were spooked, shaking and jumping around as well. I slammed the door shut and clasped the padlock. A sickening boom shook the entire wall of the barn as 29 began to claw at the door. Oh, 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 the beast croaked before chittering once more. I backed away from the door slowly, its wooden frame bending and contorting at the sheer force behind it. Without another warning, I turned my back to the barn and ran to my car as 29 began wailing and pounding. I never ended up making any rounds that night. Instead, I started my car and left that fucking place in the rear view mirror. I didn't even tell my boss. In fact, I avoided several of his phone calls because I had nothing to say. I figured it would be best if I just quit the easy way. There are certain things in life that back you into corners. Silence forces your hand, you know. That's why I'm writing this now. I still wanted my money. A few weeks later, just before making my 2-hour drive back to college, I stopped by the farm to pick up my final check. My boss wasn't in his office on Tuesdays, so I took advantage of the situation and granted myself access with the key that I had seen him kick under the rug once or twice. After snagging my check and a few Jolly Ranchers, I got in my car and slowly began to drive away. Out of the corner of my eye, a young farmhand standing in the grazing field caught my attention. I lowered my window and said, "Hey kid, stay away from the night shift," but he didn't answer me, nor even look at me. He just continued to stare at the pile of bones before him. As I kept driving, I kept staring at him, and he wouldn't even move an inch. That's when something struck me as odd. His head was tilted sideways, similar to 29's head. I swear, I'm never going back to that farm again.